UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon, this is Talk Drive. I'm Peter Cardwell. Well, just as one two-tier justice policy has been whacked and put down, in fact, legislation has been introduced to stop it by the government, another one pops up. This is another two-tier justice row. This is an official report by chief constables telling officers that racial equity does not mean treating everybody the same. They want equality of outcomes. Well, they're not going to get it because there isn't equality. Equality is something you can strive for, but it's not going to exist, and it's not up to the police force to retrofit it. We're going to be talking about that. We're also going to be talking about coked up coppers and the fact that there are many, far too many police officers who come to work drunk or on drugs. We have a Talk exclusive about that. Bill Mageddon has hit. I'm sure you, like me, have had many bills through the door either today or in the last few days. They've gone up a lot. My water bill went up 28%. I'm sure lots of people have experienced similar things. And I'll be telling you why Claire from the Wirral, Claire, if you're listening, you owe me £10. Give me a ring and I'll collect my debt. Lots to discuss between now and 7 o'clock here on Drive. I'm sitting in for Jeremy Kyle. You can make sure you get your voice on the air. I can see the phone's going already. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV or follow me at Peter Cardwell. You can send me a voice note. You can send me a WhatsApp text message, or you can give me a ring on the main number 0344 499 1000. Loads to discuss between now and 7, whether you're sitting at home, whether you're one of the car dwellers on your way home. You're very welcome to the programme here on Talk. Well, if you've listened to this station at all in the last few weeks, you'll know that a lot of us, including me, have been banging on about the two-tier justice rules, the absolutely outrageous suggestion that someone's ethnicity should mean they're treated differently by the courts. That has now been reversed. The Sentencing Council has been beaten by the government and by Robert Jenrick, who is the Shadow Justice Secretary. He threatened legal action. That's now sorted, it seems, and the government have introduced legislation today to say that that shouldn't ever happen again. But look, here's another two-tier justice row. It's emerged that police have been told to treat black and white suspects differently. This is a report by policing chiefs declaring their commitment to racial equity does not mean treating everyone the same or being colourblind. Isn't that what justice is meant to be? Isn't that what the country is meant to do? Instead, they've called for equality of policing outcomes for different ethnic groups, ending racial disparity and the likelihood of being criminalised. Anti-racism commitment also states that officers must now consider the cultural impact and community trauma when using their powers. I don't want them to think about community trauma. I don't want them to think about cultural impact. I want them to think about who's broken the law and who hasn't. Should that person be arrested? Should they not? Should charges be pressed? Should a file be given to the Crown Prosecution Service? This is deeply unjust and it's going to put people at risk. Luke Giddos is a lawyer at Murray Human. He is also a writer. Luke, thank you for joining me. Are you as outraged as I am by this absolute nonsense?
Well, it's an insult to the idea of the rule of law. It makes a mockery of what we should hold dear in a rational and reasonable justice system. These inequalities that are being spoken about do exist in terms of there are disparities when it comes to how young black men are treated by the police. They're more likely to be stopped and searched. They're more likely to be arrested for particular offences. Tragically, they're also more likely to be the victim of certain kinds of offending, most notably violent knife and gun crime. But these disparities reflect deep social inequalities. They reflect facts about our wider society that we as a society need to reckon with. It's not the job of the police to effectively engineer social outcomes by taking differential approaches to policing. That's an extremely dangerous approach, and one which actually ends up really underserving black and ethnic minority communities in our cities. If you go and speak to people who are affected by knife crime, by drug crime, many of them actually want more police. They want more police involvement in their communities to crack down on the serious crime that is a huge blight for so many of them. I mean, the area where I live in East London is seriously affected by knife crime, by drug crime. And we would love more police to be on the street dealing with real, genuine crime. But instead, we get told that actually the police are going to take a, hands-off approach. And that's just not what people want. I think the police are getting this massively wrong.
And it's so straightforward, Luke, isn't it? This is saying that equity, this idea of not equality, but equity, that worries me, because you're essentially saying that even if people are committing crimes, what you need to do is a sort of average outcome, and to say that proportionately fewer people should be arrested and prosecuted because they're a smaller part of the community. It's essentially like saying you're teaching a classroom of children and there are 30 of them and 15 of them are never going to win the race, but they've all got to win the race, the running race at sports day. They've all got to do it, even though one of them can't, a few of them can't run, they're not particularly sporty, but they want an equity of outcome, and it's blaming the teacher, or in this case, blaming the police for other problems that are in society. And that's what concerns me, because you can't retrofit justice.
Take an issue like stop and search. In order for stop and search to be effective, it has to be driven by intelligence. And that intelligence is garnered by police officers on the ground. And that intelligence might give you a really difficult picture, but a true picture, i.e., that young black men in inner cities, in particular areas of London, like mine, are more likely to be found with knives than white kids from the Wirral. That seems to me to be perfectly established in evidence and in fact. Stop and search needs to be exercised with intelligence. It needs to use that information in order to effectively deploy that power. There's no way around it. The only alternative is to completely blindly use these powers against anyone and everyone in an equitable way. Now, that would be perfectly fair, but it would completely undermine the use of the power in an intelligent and intelligence-based way. It would be using the power in a way which was totally divorced from real life. Now, this is not what these communities want. They don't want to be patronized. They don't want the police to ignore the problems that are persistent amongst particular young people. They recognize that there is a problem and they want it dealt with. And I think if you really go and speak to the people that are affected by knife crime, their number one concern is not actually racial prejudice within the police. Of course, that can be an issue, but I think they're far more concerned about young people dying and young people not being caught with the knives that they're carrying to school, to and from school, etc. If we are at the risk of generating further and real community trauma from failing to police properly, failing to police these areas of our cities properly. And the more that we get influenced by these ridiculous policies, the more we take ourselves away from actually using the powers in a reasonable and intelligence-based way.
Why do these policies get anywhere? The Sentencing Council, which we'll talk about in a second, if that's okay with you, Luke, is an organisation that developed a policy to not treat people the same for 2 years. This anti-racism commitment from police chiefs, it hasn't come out of nowhere. They haven't decided just yesterday we're going to do this. This has been something that they've talked about, they've developed, they've taken evidence on, they've done consultations on, but still it goes forward. Why is that, Luke? I mean, you can say that's a naive question because there's so much wokery around, and that's fine, but surely there must be someone somewhere along the way who says this is complete madness. It's not fair to anybody.
Taking it back a few decades, the police in the 70s, 80s, and to some extent into the 90s, had a very difficult relationship with minority communities in this country, culminating with, of course, the murder of Stephen Lawrence, which brought this issue to public attention. What we've seen in the last 2 decades is an attempt to reverse that relationship and an attempt to re-establish credibility amongst ethnic minority communities. I think that process really came to a head with the killing of George Floyd, where you saw police forces in this country really genuflecting to a politicized movement in the form of Black Lives Matter. There was a lot of deference to Black Lives Matter protests in the course of the lockdown. We saw police officers actively running away from demonstrators when they were protesting in breach of the lockdown rules. And that was an important symbolic moment for the police. It showed us that they had prioritized maintaining and developing a relationship with ethnic minority communities at the expense of actually policing those communities. And actually that creates a huge problem today on the streets of London, because they are prioritizing their public impression over and above their ability to properly police.
And elsewhere in the country as well, not just London. Luke, I wonder if I can ask you just for your thoughts on the fact that the Sentencing Council, yielding to pressure from the government, from the opposition as well, from Robert Jenrick, they have decided to do a U-turn on their own policy of two-tier justice. That's a good thing, and I think that's a victory for common sense. Do you think they'll sit down and be quiet now, or could the Sentencing Council actually be abolished? What do you think?
Ideally, the Sentencing Council would be quiet. I think the Sentencing Council would like to be quiet. You know, the judiciary don't like being in the public eye, and they don't like being part of political debate. I don't think the Sentencing Council saw this coming. They're much more used to dealing with legal processes and lawyers like me. They're used to being quiet, having their work done quietly. So I do think this will be the end for this for this guideline. I don't think they anticipated the backlash, and I think now they will recognize that they are under some political pressure that they are certainly not used to. I mean, it's hard to think of a time when the Sentencing Council has ever had this kind of scrutiny on them. We know them as an impartial, objective, distant body that occasionally issue sentencing guidelines, which we then use to advise our clients on what sentence they're likely to get in court. We never think of them as any kind of politicized body, but that is the impression that they're starting to develop now. So I think they will be a bit spooked by this. I don't think this was their intention. I'd be very surprised. I mean, this guideline is dead now, I think. I don't think it will come back in the form that, and you know, as you say, there is legislation being anticipated. And if legislation were to be passed, you know, the powers of the Sentencing Council are dependent on legislation. They're subservient to Parliament. So MPs can decide the remit of their powers. And I think that's a good thing for everyone. The Sentencing Council will want to go back to being the quiet, objective, distant organisation that they're supposed to be. And thankfully, these terrible presumptions, which would have introduced differential treatment for people from different minority backgrounds into our legal system, have been consigned to the dustbin.
Luke, thank you. That's Luke Gittos there. He is a lawyer at Murray Human, and he is also a writer. So thank you to Luke for that. I should say, actually, I spoke to Claire in the Wirral a few days ago, and she said that she bet me a tenner that the government wouldn't put legislation down on the Sentencing Council guidelines. Claire, they did. I'm afraid you owe me a tenner. Give me a ring, 0344 499 1000. I want your views on that, and indeed everything, anybody else, of course, on what Luke is saying there. There's a lot in that, and I think there are these sort of two separate issues. One, the Sentencing Council capitulating, doing what it should have done, and now this new two-tier justice row saying that police have been told to treat black and white suspects differently in the name of racial equity. Not equality, equity, which is outcomes being the same. I think it's absolutely outrageous. What do you think? 0344 499 1000. Stay with us here on Talk.
what the extent of, unless you have free speech, you can't have free trade is. I don't think any of us quite know what's going on right now behind the scenes, but I think we really rather blown it with America, I'm afraid. I do think if these tariffs are slapped on with everybody, I do think we have an opportunity to be the first country to get out of them, for the obvious reasons that our trade with America is roughly in balance. And hey, you know what? They are the biggest foreign investor in Britain, and we're the biggest foreign investor in America. So we've got lots of mutual interest. It's bad news, but we can get out of it.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thanks to everybody who's been in touch, including Trevor and Harrow, who says, "Good afternoon, Peter. Nice to hear you on during the afternoon. Will the police inspectors take full accountability for these decisions? As I can see, in a few years, these will scrutinise and be literally laughed at. Will they bet their pensions on it? I'm literally going to start a parliamentary petition tomorrow that states that the statue of justice above the Old Bailey should be removed until blind justice is restored." Paul says it's worse than you think. Ethnic minorities will take the police to court for not policing them effectively, says Paul. Well, we have a voice note from another Paul on two-tier policing. This is what he has to say.
The two-tier policing that we see nowadays is due very much to the College of Policing. It's a quango, and it's full of failed police officers who have never policed the streets. The National Police Chiefs Council, again, is full of fast-track police officers that have never policed the streets. You wouldn't follow these guys out of blind curiosity on a wet Tuesday afternoon, and sadly we're going to see more stupid decisions like this. I'm afraid policing in this country is now a busted flush. All my friends don't bother calling the police. We look upon them as a joke now, and it's so sad because 50 years ago, 40 years ago, policing in this country was the finest in the world.
You're absolutely right, and I remember growing up respecting the police who kept me safe and kept everybody safe as much as they could in Northern Ireland, and respecting the police. And now I have so many different questions, including about the College of Policing, as Paul correctly says there. And Peter Blexley's our crime commentator, former Metropolitan Police detective himself, I'm sure has said, well, I know he said it on numerous occasions to me, that he thinks the College of Policing should be disbanded. We'll continue talking about that. If you want to get your voice note in on it, or give me a call, 0344 499 1000 is the number. But I just want to talk about how we're all feeling financially at the moment, because I don't know about you, but I mean, the first day of the month is when all my bills come out of my account, and I noticed my water bill had gone up 28% today. It cost nearly £100. I live in a small flat, one person, I have a lodger a couple of nights a week, but it's mainly just me. And yes, nearly £100 just for water. And I'm sure there are many, many other people who have very high bills. Council bills are up. Everything seems to be up. And this is what I'm calling Bill Mageddon. And I know that Keir Starmer has said that he thinks that people should feel better off under Labour. Let's just remind ourselves what the Prime Minister has said about this, and then we'll talk about how you feel about it.
You may have seen from the spring statement last week, the prediction is that everybody will be on average about £500 a year better off because living standards are going up. So it's really important that we deliver on that, because I think people do feel after the last few years that more money in the front pocket and feeling better off is hugely important. And I'm conscious of the fact that bills are going up at the same time, and therefore making sure wages and what goes in the pocket outstrips what's going out in bills is really important.
I just don't think that's going to happen. £500 a year better off, if that does actually happen, great. But is that going to cover the rise in the cost of living? £500 over 12 months is not an awful lot of money, and that's for the average family. And if you think about all the different bills, groceries are going up, water bills going up, people's mortgages, often a lot of people coming off fixed term mortgages are going up as well. There are lots and lots of different aspects of this, and single parents apparently are hit hardest by the awful April bill rises. Bill Mageddon, I'm calling it. Let's talk to Benjamin Elks. He's a spokesman for the Taxpayers Alliance. Benjamin, thank you for this. for chatting to me today. It's just outrageous. The cost of living is going up. Do you believe the Prime Minister when he says we're all going to be £500 better off soon?
First of all, thank you very much for having me on this afternoon, Peter. I think, quite simply, no, I don't believe him. And as you rightly say, you know, water bills are going up, energy bills are going up, the cost of the weekly shop is going up, council tax bills are going up. And so this is a really difficult time for people across the country. You know, there are people who are struggling to make ends meet, being asked to hand over more and more just to fund a government that refuses to get its spending under control.
Yeah, and I mean, is the government at fault here? Are there global factors that are at fault? We're hearing tomorrow about Donald Trump. We're going to talk about it a bit later on the programme in regard to the fact that these tariffs may be coming and may put our bills up even further.
I think primarily, actually, it is a problem with our own government. We spend as a country around £1.2 trillion every year. Since Labour came to office, they embarked on a massive spending spree, whether that was through public sector pay rises or things like GB Energy. So, and at the same time, they've then dipped into the pockets of taxpayers and said, you need to hand over more. You might be struggling, but we want to pay for this, so you need to give up more of your money.
I want to talk about some people who are not feeling the pinch, people who are on the Town Hall rich list. This has been produced by the Taxpayers Alliance. These are people running local government, and many people, including me, have had an increase in their council tax. I think mine was 4.3%, something like that. It was certainly between 4 and 5% anyway, and I certainly felt the increase there. The largest bonus was given to the Chief Executive of Edinburgh International Conference Centre, which is a man called Marshall Dallas, who received £51,000 in a bonus in 2023-24. That's more in a bonus than most people earn in a year. The average salary in this country is about £36,000. So Marshall Dallas presumably putting on absolutely brilliant conferences. If you want a conference and you want it to be a good conference, go to Edinburgh, because there's 50 grand's worth of bonus for Marshall there. Some of these salaries are eye-watering. Castle Point in the east of England, not even the chief executive, the strategic director brackets resources, Chris Mills, is on £565,000 a year. In the northwest, John Reedman, who's the interim director of children's services, £335,364,000. And the biggest remuneration package, Glasgow's chief executive. It pays to be in one of these positions if you're in Glasgow or Edinburgh. There's plenty of money sloshing around there. Anne-Marie O'Donnell, £567,317 a year. That is what she earns for running Glasgow. That's about, what, 4 times as much as the Prime Minister? Maybe not quite as much as that, at least 3 times anyway. Why do these people have such ridiculously high salaries?
That's a very good question. So yes, this is the Town Hall Rich List that we produce every year. We document every council employee who receives over £100,000 in a single year. And this year was a bumper record. It was a record year. We had 3,906 council employees receiving over 100 grand. Now, you know, like most of your listeners, I imagine I don't earn anywhere near that amount. And yet, like you, I've also seen my council tax bill go up. And at the same time, you see sort of, bins going uncollected, potholes not being...
Look at Birmingham. Look at the fact that there's a dispute there. It is a public health emergency in Birmingham because people aren't collecting the bins. And there's so many people who watch and listen to the station, people who ring me all the time, Benjamin, who say, I'm paying all this money out, I don't know what I'm getting back. I really, my bins are collected every 2 weeks if you're lucky. They're terrible potholes. There are all sorts of problems. You try to ring the council, you're on hold for a long time to do basic things. And councils are under pressure because they've got a lot of social care to do and so on. That's about half of what councils do these days. But most people don't access social care. And so many people working really hard, paying more money out, higher than the rate of inflation, most of these bills going up, including in Scotland. In the Shetland Islands, for example, council tax bills have gone up by something like 16%. Everywhere in Scotland, it's a minimum of 8% has gone up. I mean, I'm not sure. I do wonder how these people actually look at themselves in the mirror. I wonder how Anne-Marie O'Donnell looks at herself in the mirror and says, do you know what? Glasgow is just a great place. It's absolutely brilliant, and I definitely deserve £567,317 a year.
Yeah, again, another great question. Look, I don't know how people manage that at all. As we say, whenever councils are asked to make savings, they always go after the things that people actually rely on. Rather than getting their own houses in order, rather than looking at their excessive pay packets or the packages that they're offering out to employees, they say, no, we'll keep our stuff, thanks. We're going to come after you. You're going to pay us more. And you know what? We're going to do a bit less for the privilege of it. So, yeah.
Benjamin, thank you for your thoughts. Benjamin Elks there, spokesman for the Taxpayers Alliance, who've produced this Town Hall Rich list. 3,906, nearly 4,000 council buses receiving over £100,000 in the last year. And you're paying for it. This is not people in the private sector. These are public employees on over £100,000 a year, many of them earning far more than the Prime Minister earns. Freya is in the West Midlands and has given me a ring on 0344 499 1000. Freya, thanks for the call. What would you like to say?
Hello.
Hello.
Hello. Yeah, I am actually in the centre of England.
Okay.
But yeah, I lived a long time in Coventry.
Right.
I was part of, the movement, if you like, specials, two-tone, anti-racism. I went through a hell of a lot of stuff going through that. But at the same time now, I totally regret the downfall of our police service.
Well, there are lots of people who really feel that is the case, and yes. I know you have some thoughts on the rises in the bills as well. What do you think about that?
Bills? Well, I have a water meter. I'm careful. I've grown up in the years when we had electricity power cuts. I'm
You're thrifty.
Forgive me. I don't wash and shower every day because back in the day the bath was used for washing my clothes.
Yeah.
So I've grown up a bit in the past.
But surely even someone as thrifty as you, Freya, who keeps an eye on these bills, must have noticed them going up.
Yes, and I'm also noticing the pressure I'm getting to have a smartphone.
Do you mean a smart meter?
A smartphone.
A smartphone, okay.
Yes.
Okay, you
I
don't
have a very old Sony Ericsson phone, which does me quite all I need.
Well, just you keep that. I mean, if you don't want to get a smartphone, just don't get a smartphone, Freya. It's your choice. Thanks for the call. That's Freya there. And John has been in touch from Long Lawford, who says, I don't think anyone will believe Starmer when he says we'll be £500 better off this year. Just look at his track record. He has proven to be a serial liar. And how far does £500 go these days anyway? What astounds me is that to the likes of Starmer, £500 is peanuts. Well, certainly if you're a family and it's £500 a year and you divide that by 12, what is £500 divided by 12? Come on, Ryan. The producer will get him to do that and put it on the screen. Per month, if you've 3 or 4 people in your family, it's not going to go too far. Jane says the only people, £41.6 a month, £40 a month, is that really going to make a massive difference to your life? I'm not sure it is. I think £40 could be very easily, I don't even know if I will do a weekly shop for 4 people. I would imagine it would be far below that, twice or maybe 3 times that. Jane says the only people who won't be poorer will be the ones working in the House of Commons. If they haven't claimed for it in expenses, they will be getting it for free. There'll be no poverty in the Starmer Reeves household, no worrying where the next penny is coming to for them, says Jane. Gary says, my advice to you is to get a water meter fitted, Peter. Your bill will be at least half what it has gone up to. It's your right to have one, and if for some reason the water company can't fit one at your property, they'll have to reduce what you pay for your bill would likely to be if you had one. I will investigate that, Gary. Thank you. I'm a pensioner living on £700 a month. I no longer bath or cook or boil kettles. I live frugally in order to live. That's terrible that there are people in this country who are feeling that way, and thank you for your message on that. Kenny says, hi Cardi P, I want to swap salaries with Keir Starmer and let's see if he feels better off getting paid what I do and having to pay the bills he has made it impossible to pay. There's a lot of anger about this, and pensions as well. Colin in Doncaster says, every bill under the sun is going up. My pension rise was £8 a week. Don't think that's going to make much difference, Colin. Reg says, in regards to the water rates going up, request a water meter. You only pay for what you use, and then if they can't install one, they have to give you a very big discount to compensate. I'm fairly sure in my building I can't get a water meter, but I will investigate that. Stuart in Perthshire says, Peter, there isn't much to celebrate about being in Scotland these days, but when I hear about the water charges you all suffer down there, it makes me thankful I am here. Isn't it so laughable that a country that rains so much could charge its citizens for water? Stuart, I've always found it absurd that that's the case. If there's a charge through council tax or whatever to say, right, we've got to keep the sewerage sorted, we've got to keep the pipes done, that's okay, but actually charging for water to come through your taps. My water doesn't come through 28% faster than it did yesterday. It doesn't come through 28% hotter. It doesn't come through, it's not 28% tastier than it was yesterday, but it is 28% more expensive. Right, we're going to talk in just a second about a talk exclusive. This is coked up coppers turning up for duty, drunk and drug-addled policemen and women turning up for duty in many police forces, including Greater Manchester. We're going to talk about that with Danny Shaw, the Home Affairs commentator, in just a second here on Talk. If you want to get your call in during the break to comment on anything we've talked about today, or to challenge me or challenge Danny, still haven't heard from Claire in the World, owes me the tenner, 0344 499 1000.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Just been looking at my Twitter there over the break. Thanks to everybody who has sent me a message, including Paul, who says if the public are going to be £500 a year better off, then the household bills would need to come down by hundreds of pounds a month. I, for one, don't believe Keir Starmer, and I don't think he even believes the words coming out of his mouth. #Labour lies, says Paul Butler. Tony says, as a man of a certain vintage, the UK is getting more and more like 78, 79 by the day. Labour isn't working again. Great show, Peter. I have that poster, actually. Sue says, I think we're beginning to see who Starmer sees as working people, those poor, hard-done-by public sector council leaders. Mark says, on the subject of water bills, we also have to pay Thames Water our wastewater. They also charge us for rainwater. Lisa says, I reckon I'm at least £500 a month worse off. School fees have hit hard, and of course the regular bills as well. Les has been in touch as well, says, Peter, are you sure you're telling the water company and HMRC about the Irish distillery that you're running with your Cat Jack at your flat? No, it's actually a water company called Peckham Spring. I don't know if you're familiar with that. There was a documentary about it a few years ago on the BBC called Only Fools and Horses. Right then, on a more serious note, let's talk about the shocking new figures revealing cops across Britain have been caught taking drugs and turning up for work drunk. An explosive Freedom of Information investigation by our team behind the scenes here at Talk has uncovered that 112 police officers and staff were found to be under the influence or in possession of drugs over the past 3 years. Another 83 policemen and women were identified as intoxicated on shift or just before clocking in. Worst of them all, Greater Manchester Police. 80 officers or staff busted for drugs, a further 17 for being drunk at work in a 2-year period between 2022 and 2024. Nearly 4,800 random drug tests were carried out by the 36 police forces who responded to our information request. Class A opiates in Staffordshire, cannabis in North and West Yorkshire, and illegally controlled Class C drugs in Hampshire. What on earth is going on here? These police are meant to be on the beat. They're meant to be keeping us safe, but they're not safe themselves. In fact, they're breaking the law themselves. Let's talk to Danny Shaw. He is a police and crime and justice commentator. He's a former advisor to the Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper. Danny, does this shock you? It shocks me.
Hi, Peter. Look, these findings are really troubling. There's no doubt about that. We expect our police officers and staff to have the highest standards, and to hear that so many have been found taking drugs or drunk on duty or before they come onto duty is really worrying. But I think we need to put a little bit of perspective on it. There are 236,000 officers and staff across England and Wales, 236,000. So the numbers here are a small fraction. I mean, that's not to excuse the behaviour at all.
And I get that. And in any large group of people, you're going to have a few wrong-uns. But this is certainly concerning, I'm sure, to you and to me and to many of our viewers and listeners, in that there are people whose job it is to literally implement the law and to keep us safe are actually taking Class A drugs, for example.
Yeah, I think this might partly be due to the fact that we have a police workforce that is very inexperienced. About a third of police officers have less than 5 years service. There's been a huge recruitment campaign since Boris Johnson came in 2019 and announced that police would have to recruit 20,000 more officers. What that actually meant was that over a period of around 3 years, they recruited 50,000, 20,000 to get the numbers back up to where they were, and around 30,000 just to fill the vacancies as people left. And so I think that has put pressure on some forces to recruit officers who perhaps wouldn't necessarily quite, meet the requirements before. There was certainly a big recruitment rush on. And it could be that some of the officers are unfortunately not quite, up to the sort of scratch in terms of the culture and ethics of the service. I'm speculating a bit here, but I think the inexperience of the service certainly may account for
I agree with you, Danny, and I can certainly see your point there, and I know that sometimes in recruitment drives, if you recruit very quickly, you often don't get the best people. I get that. But it's not an experience that, anybody knows that if you're a police officer, you shouldn't be on drugs.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think what's happening here is that there is some drug taking that has become sort of almost acceptable, almost commonplace among young people,
not
right?
Class A opiates.
In the way that, when I was growing up, cocaine, no one took cocaine. Now young people can get hold of cocaine and ketamine, other, Class A drugs.
We had a cabinet minister, Michael Gove, admitted taking lines of cocaine, for example.
Yeah, and that sort of seeps over, that sort of culture can seep over, I think, with people who are being recruited into the police quite early on, into those sorts of ways, and that's really unfortunate. I think the other thing to point out, Peter, is that the testing regime, the random testing regime, and the standards are tougher than they used to be. If you go back 20 years or so, I rember actually seeing some of the random drug testing being undertaken by the Met Police some years ago for a report that I was compiling, and it was very impressive. They just turned up at a police station out of the blue. Yeah. They picked certain people, and there they had to undergo their tests.
I should say that
it's clearly picking up more people than perhaps they would have done previously.
I should say that unfortunately the Metropolitan Police didn't respond to our freedom of information request. No doubt we'll be taking them to the Information Commissioner's office for that lack of response. Should say a Greater Manchester Police spokesman said, "We hold our officers and staff to the highest of standards." This is Greater Manchester Police, with 80 officers or staff busted for drugs. Officers and staff members, Greater Manchester Police say, are aware that random tests for drugs and alcohol are in place Anyone who falls below our expectations will be subject to an investigation by our Professional Standards Directorate, who will deal appropriately with the individual involved. And in fairness to them, and other forces as well, 46 police officers and police workers were either sacked or resigned following substance abuse investigations by their constabulary during this time period. It is, I mean, it's interesting, Danny, that Tim in Suffolk has been in touch and says, I'm watching now, the numbers are irrelevant, they are police in exclamation marks. There are people really shocked by this, Danny.
Yeah, look, I mean, one person, one officer or member of staff who's been taking drugs or drunk on duty is enough, right? The fact that you've got 112 plus 83 intoxicated is really troubling, even though it's a small fraction of the workforce. We demand high standards from police, and we need to ensure that those standards are maintained. And obviously, I think what this does is strengthen the case for a tighter vetting regime for the police service. We know that there have been problems with police vetting in the past. We had a case quite recently where the Met Police was trying to sack an officer who had failed his vetting, an officer who was in the force but had failed his vetting process, wasn't getting clearance, and they couldn't actually fire him. That case went to court. That shows you that there's something wrong with the rigor of the vetting processes, and I think these findings illustrate that even further.
And just speaking, we've spoken before in the last few days about the Sentencing Council. Now they have rightly capitulated to pressure from various quarters, including the Justice Secretary, Shabnam Mahmood, who, I've said it before, I'll say it again, she's done a good job on this, as has Robert Jenrick, the Shadow Justice Secretary. It's not often like I praise Labour frontbenchers. Shabnam Mahmood did a good job. She did her job. She made sure that this didn't happen, and they've introduced legislation for that reason. That's now done and dusted, hopefully. But we see now another story about two-tier police race guide. Right, I know you've been reporting on this, Danny, the official report by chief constables telling officers that racial equity does not mean treating everyone the same. Where is this now, do you think?
Well, I know that this has been raised by the Conservative spokesman, Chris Philp, I think, in the Commons yesterday, and Yvette Cooper, my old boss, effectively sort of dismissed a little bit of the concerns raised by Chris Philp. I mean, I think some of the wording in that document's really unfortunate. I kind of get what they're trying to say. I think what they're trying to say is everyone's equal before the law, but you have to take it into account that, you know, that there are differences. For example, someone, let's say, who has certain headdress because of their religion, you know, that has to be taken account of. Let's say if you're the police service and you're employing that person.
In what way should that be taken into account? I mean, if someone's broken the law,
they may be allowed to wear that headdress. They may be allowed to take certain days off because they have religious festivals, whereas someone else from another religion may want to take different days off for religious festivals.
That's fair enough, and I don't think there's any issue about that necessarily. But the problem is that if you're not treating people equally before the law, if you're saying that people should be treated differently because they are of a different ethnicity in terms of the equity of outcomes, that's attempting to me anyway, that is attempting to retrofit the problems in society and asking the police to fix them.
Well, you shouldn't treat people differently before the law, and you shouldn't be aiming.
That's what this appears to do.
But for different outcomes, and if the guidance, and I haven't read every dot and comma of it, but if it says that, it's wrong. I think what it's trying to say is that you've got to recognise that everyone's different. We all come from different backgrounds.
But that's common sense.
Some of us have got different religious beliefs.
For, and that's nothing to do with race either.
Well, these are in the College of Policing, the Race Action Plan guidelines, and I think, I think the wording may be problematic, but I think the sentiment behind it, Peter, is that you have to recognise we're not all the same.
But we do anyway. I mean, when has anybody not recognised that?
Well, I think there have been examples of that if you go back over the years, and I think we're aware of that.
But I tell you what a lot of our viewers and listeners are worried about, and what I'm worried about as well. I'm worried about two people who've done exactly the same thing, committed exactly the same crime, being treated differently because of their ethnicity. That's not going to happen now in the judicial system, and that's good. That's been clamped down on. What I see in these policing recommendations is that criminals will be treated differently because of the colour of their skin, and that is really concerning. That is wrong.
Well, that shouldn't be in the guidelines, and I'm sure that's pretty much not what the guidelines are intended. But what I think the sentiment behind it is to understand that we are all different, and if I tell you something, that may be received differently from if I tell someone else from a different ethnic group or religious background something that may be received in a different way. And it's having an understanding of that, rather than saying to someone, oh, you're going to get a light sentence, you're going to get a heavy sentence. That's something completely different. It's understanding how people receive what you say and what you tell them what you do.
I think it's a bit more than that, Danny. But listen, thank you for joining us today. Danny Shaw is a policing crime and justice commentator. He's also a former advisor to Yvette Cooper. Some breaking news here on Talk, and that is that 10 car makers and 2 industry groups have been fined almost £78 million for colluding to restrict competition over vehicle recycling. That is according to the Competition and Markets Authority. That's 10 car makers, 2 industry groups as well have been fined almost £78 million for colluding to restrict competition over vehicle recycling. That is according to the Competition and Markets Authority. It used to be the Monopolies and Mergers Commission, but there's only one of them. Why? Anyway, we will bring you the latest on that as well. No doubt there'll be more to talk about on that. On the police as well, Tim says, who's been in touch before, he says, during the Olympic Park construction, machine operators were tested every day before they started work. If construction can do it daily, why can't police forces? Very, very reasonable point. Mick says, as a retired officer, I've never heard such a weak response to your questions like those of Danny Shaw, says Mick. Stephen says, great show regarding police taking drugs. Let's get numbers in perspective. Whilst a small percentage of the whole, let's keep in mind that these are the only officers caught, not the pool of drug taking officers in total. That's correct. Actually, Tim is saying, why can't we just test every police officer every day? I don't necessarily have a problem with that. Maybe not every single day, because drugs can be in your system for a long time and you don't necessarily have to be tested. Things like cannabis, I think, can be in your system for months. So if you test people once a week or something, it does roughly the same job. But there should be no police officer, not a single one in this country, who is under the influence of any drugs. Simon says, are these police officers taking the drugs from criminals, just like prison officers, turning a blind eye? Where are they getting them from? Well, they're going to have to source them from criminals. And yes, even if you do buy a little bit of cannabis from, your mate's cousin or whatever, that is still illegal. And if a police officer is doing that, they should be arrested for it, as should anybody else. And I don't know about you, but I've seen so many times on so many occasions, so much of a war against people who smoke. I don't smoke. One of my very best friends in the world died of lung cancer. I don't want anybody to smoke, and people know the dangers there. But it seems to me that there's a lot of punitive nature of a lot of restrictions put on people who smoke. But people just seem to be able to smoke cannabis in the street with no problem. And we know the cannabis is really bad for you. We know it's illegal. We know that it has major implications for your mental health. And there's a lot of stuff we don't know about it that scientists are still developing. So why don't police implement the law and crack down on that, including on themselves? Let me know your thoughts about that. 0344 499 1000. We'll take some calls after the break.
what the extent of, unless you have free speech, you can't have free trade is. I don't think any of us quite know what's going on right now behind the scenes, but I think we really rather blown it with America, I'm afraid. I do think if these tariffs are slapped on with everybody, I do think we have an opportunity to be the first country to get out of them, for the obvious reasons that our trade with America is roughly in balance. And hey, you know what? They are the biggest foreign investor in Britain, and we're the biggest foreign investor in America. So we've got lots of mutual interest. It's bad news, but we can get out of it.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thanks to Mick in Wallington, who's texted me to say anybody joining the police today must have a political motive because they can have not joined to assist the public without bias. I will never respect or assist them again. If I need help, I will call a private security company. Do you know, I've spoken to someone who runs one of those private security companies, and I know a bit about them because I lived in South Africa for a while during my gap year. And they are, the armed response guys come around with guns. That's what I want to happen if someone's burgling me or in my flat. But it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen in this country. Elizabeth says a police officer buying drugs could then be blackmailed into more criminal activity. You're absolutely right, Elizabeth. And Lewis has been in touch on this with a voice note.
I just wanted to say that I work in aerospace, and I have worked in businesses where you get drug tested every year for everything and anything. I don't understand why the police has to get to a point where what is the frequency of the police force is my question.
Well, it's a very, very good point. Thanks also to Sean, who says the railway has zero tolerance on drugs and alcohol with random testing, yet that fool is defending our police, calling Danny Shaw a fool. Well, I don't think Danny Shaw's a fool, but I do disagree with him. Dallas Nash has been in touch to say, hi Peter, in the same sentence, Starmer has stated that bills are going up and everyone will feel better off. Clearly he attended the same economics classes as Rachel Peeves. On the nature of all these people in the public sector being paid so much money, Mark in Warwickshire has been in touch. He's given me a ring on 0344 499 1000. Mark, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Hi, Peter. Thanks for having me on. It was just, I heard it mentioned on Talk earlier about the ticking time bomb of the pension schemes in the public sector.
Yeah.
It just made me think. I mean, I've worked all my life in the private sector, and we gave up on defined benefit schemes about 10 years ago because they're too expensive to maintain. Now, I don't begrudge anybody in the public sector who's signed up for a defined benefit scheme and has got this gold-plated benefit because that's what they signed up for.
Yeah.
But they're hellishly expensive to maintain, as opposed to a defined contribution scheme. So my sort of wish would be that in the public sector that they abandoned defined benefit schemes and switched to defined contribution schemes.
I think they mostly have anyway, Mark, but there are obviously still a number of people who signed up to those who are still in public roles and are retired and receiving all that, and they're living longer as well.
Yeah, but if you look at the local government pension scheme, there's about 6 million members in that scheme. About 2 million of them are active members, 2 million are in deferment. That is, they used to be in local government but have gone on to do something else.
Yeah.
And then there's another 2,000 who are actually pensioners.
Yeah.
So, and that is a defined benefit scheme.
And they're actually, sorry, Mark, go ahead.
So it's a defined benefit scheme, but it's not a final salary scheme. It might be career average earnings.
Well, listen, I think you're absolutely right, Mark. I don't disagree with a single word, and there's so many economic problems that are coming down the track that we just can't get rid of. Even if the economy goes really, really well, there are all sorts of problems that are there to trip us up. And I think you're absolutely right in what you say. Let's speak quickly to Kenny in Glasgow, who has some thoughts on the two-tier nature of justice and policing in this country. Kenny, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Good afternoon, Peter.
Hi, Kenny.
My thoughts on this two-tier justice system is basically this. the people who implemented this should be done for treason against the British people. If you are willing to take one part of society and treat them differently from the rest, now let's be honest here, the vast majority of these people are not going to be British born. And they're going to be immigrants. So,
but to me, it doesn't really matter whether they are or not. I mean, if you're treated differently because of the nature of your skin, you know.
Well, regardless of that, but
yeah.
You're treating people differently.
Yeah, exactly.
Britain. So what you're doing is wrong, and I would hold them to account. I would do them for treason, and I would happily kick the stool away from their feet myself.
Okay, well, I don't think I would advocate capital punishment, but clearly you're angry about this, Kenny, and clearly you think this needs to go.
That's what happens with treason, Peter. When you get done for treason, it's capital punishment.
Okay, well, I don't believe in capital punishment. I know it exists, but I don't think it's a good way to stop people committing crimes. But Kenny, thank you very much indeed for that. Kevin in Sheffield says, as a hard-working taxpayer, I'm currently at work at the moment and I'm messaging you, I don't like it when any of my bills go up. I get quite angry, but begrudgingly grit my teeth, carry on. However, I feel like it's not only paying whacking great increases in gas, electricity, community charge, TV licence, green bin tax, house insurance, but also seem to be paying for other people who use all the same amenities but play zero into the system. In effect, I and many more are paying twice. I'm utterly fed up of being bled dry. Great debate as always, Peter, says Kevin in Sheffield. Yeah, there are a load of people who pay, they pay tax on VAT and things like that, but there are a lot of people who don't pay any income tax, don't pay council tax and things like that. That's because they don't have as much money, and that's something, you know, we can debate that if you want. Should those people pay the same bills as you pay? Well, what if they can't afford them? What do they do in that regard? And I think there are a lot of people who feel that they are being bled dry. Kevin's one of them, and I think other people feel the same way. Maybe you're one of them. Give me a ring, 0344 499 1000. Lots to debate in the next hour here on Talk, and we're going to do that between now and 7 on this station. Stay with us.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good evening, this is Talk Drive. I'm Peter Cardwell. Thank you so much for your company here on Talk. There's lots to discuss. Keir Starmer says that the cost of living will get easier, £500 a year. Better off, that's what families are going to be. Well, are we? Are we going to feel that? Because today is Bill-mageddon. All the bills are going up. My water bill's gone up by 28%. I'm sure many of your bills have gone up as well. A number of people getting in touch about feeling, well, actually, you know, who are we subsidising here as well? A lot of council bosses, we're going to talk about that. We're also going to talk about Starmer's small boats record. It's the worst of any Prime Minister since the crisis began. We're also going to talk about Trump and his team monitoring pro-life free speech in the United Kingdom, and Kemi Badenoch backing Trump in an abortion free speech row. Trump has also signed off the Shagos Island deal that Starmer wants to put forward. Also, two-tier policing, a race guide row erupting as officers are told to treat black and white suspects differently, and dinghy migrants film boasting about life in hotels, with British bills rocketing by £4,500 by some calculations. Plenty to discuss between now and 7 o'clock here on Talk Drive. Whether you're at home listening, whether you're out and about, whether you're one of the car dwellers, you're very, very welcome. I'm filling in for Jeremy Kyle today. He'll be back tomorrow on Thursday, and I'll be here on Talk Drive on Friday as usual. Lots to discuss. Let me know your thoughts. 0344 499 1000. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV. You can send me a voice note, a WhatsApp text message, or pick up the phone, make the call. 0344 499 1000. Plenty to discuss between now and 7. Stay with us. Well, there was a big summit yesterday with a number of international actors involved, and we can just remind ourselves now of what the Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, said about people smuggling gangs at the immigration summit.
My message to people smugglers is this: we're breaking your business model and leaving you nowhere to hide. We're working with law enforcement partners across the world to freeze your assets, to ban your travel and put you behind bars. When I was this country's chief prosecutor, I locked up terrorists who plotted to blow up planes across the Atlantic. Now I'm going after the criminals who put people on small boats across the Channel. We're boosting enforcement with a new Border Security Command. We're giving the police more power to stop smugglers in their tracks. And we're making sure no one can profit from this vile trade. Since the election, this government has returned over 20,000 people who have no right to be here, and we aren't going to stop. Returns will continue to increase. My plan for change will save lives, secure our borders, and smash the gangs for good.
Well, I'm sure the smuggling gangs are absolutely quaking in their boots now Keir Starmer's on their case. Tom Jones is with us. He's a senior fellow at the Centre for Migration Control. He's also author of the Potemkin Village Idiot Substack. He's got the worst record of any Prime Minister since the crisis began. I mean, solving this issue, smashing the gangs, is that the impossible dream, Tom?
It really seems beyond him at the minute. I have to say, it's very, very strange. They are completely focused in on smashing the gangs, disrupting the gangs' business model, rather than doing the sensible thing, which is to tackle the incentives that create this business in the first place. They really are tackling the symptom here, rather than the actual disease, which is illegal immigrants are incredibly incentivized to come to Britain because we have a huge, very high rate of acceptance of asylum claims, far higher than European neighbours, very generous benefits, of course. And now, since we've ended Rwanda, there's no real deterrent either.
Well, that is the question. Where is the deterrent here? And I asked a senior person in the Home Office this relatively recently, and that person said, well, you know, it's the fact that you can die in the Channel. That wasn't an answer that I really thought was something that was plausible, because lots of people are taking this risk, and actually the Channel crossing is sometimes the least risky part of people coming the whole way to the United Kingdom. But the fact is, we're a soft touch. We can't seem to get a handle on this. Will this summit make a difference? Are these policies making a difference from Keir Starmer? Because the number of people arriving on small boats is far greater than Boris Johnson, substantially greater than Rishi Sunak. In fact, it's the highest since the records began 7 years ago on small boats.
Yeah, although interestingly, the Home Office has blamed this on the increased number of good weather days in the Channel that have made it easier for people to cross in a boat. But actually, the exact number of boats has not gone up compared to Rishi or Boris. Actually, what has happened is the number of migrants per boat has more than doubled. So it was about 26 under Boris Johnson. It's now over 55
per boat. Per boat. Okay, so are the small boats getting bigger then?
Yes, absolutely. They're no longer small boats. The Home Office actually say they've become a victim of their own success. Because they've disrupted the supply chain of the kind of very small inflatable boats that we're all used to seeing across Europe. And so now a lot of the gangs are actually commissioning bespoke boats to be built in Turkish back streets.
And Tom, as we know, that's just another aspect of this. You're the expert, but as we know, this is what happens, isn't it? Right? They say, we, meaning the government, I'm not the government, but the country, the UK, innovates. Then the people smugglers innovate. Then we innovate. Then they innovate. And we've seen this time and time again. We've seen it with the lorries. We've seen it with people on trains. We've seen it people coming across in lots of different ways. And it's just an innovation. It's just I wonder whether we have to accept that this is always going to happen, because smashing the gangs, as you say, is a part of it. But actually the incentives to come here have to be part of it as well. I'm not saying that we shouldn't give asylum to people. I'm not saying that if people are in desperate need that we shouldn't bring them here. We've been very compassionate with Ukraine, for example, Hong Kong. There have been various legal routes that people come here. We assess them. We say, are you an asylum seeker or are you not? And we allow them to stay in this country. But there are people who are absolutely swinging the lead here. And these people are smart. These gangs are smart. I think they're smarter than the Home Office and Border Force and Keir Starmer and Yvette Cooper's ideas to stop them, because, as you say correctly, they've innovated again. We're now the medium boats crisis.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I think they are smarter than the Home Office and Yvette Cooper and Keir Starmer, but I don't really think that's saying a lot. The truth is, we really can solve this. We do just have to do the thinkable, which is change the incentive structure that brings people here in the first place.
Is Labour going to do that? The Conservatives didn't do it. Is Labour going to do it? Have they got the will? Have they got the numbers? Have they got the wherewithal to do it? Because to me, that's what it is. You've got to say, there's got to be some sort of radical change here to say legal migration has to come down, illegal immigration has to stop.
It is questionable, given the numbers that we are now seeing, whether they will have a choice about whether to do it or not. I think public pressure will force them to do something. And I think the only thing that they are left with is bringing back a Rwanda-type deal, which there are already rumours of doing an Italy-style deal with somewhere like Albania, which will be essentially Rwanda plus.
But a lot of that Albania plan is essentially, when you come to the end of the process, of saying, right, we've assessed you, you're not you're not really genuinely an asylum seeker, therefore we're sending you either to your home country or to Albania, and you're going to live there and you can't come back to the UK. And that's okay as far as it goes, but it doesn't take away the incentive and the fact that you can stay here for a reasonable amount of time and then be sent to a safe country.
Yeah, that's very true. And again, we come back to the original problem, which is that we have sky-high acceptance rates that are much higher in any other countries. When a lot of the channel crossings were Albanians, our acceptance rate for Albanian asylum seekers was 82%. The next highest was France, which was less than 40%. So we are clearly the soft touch in Europe.
And also, if you look at the statistics, and I'm not making this up, this is absolutely true, of the quantum of people from Albania in this country, how many of them have criminal convictions? 40%. 2 out of 5. Tom, we've got to leave it there. Thank you very much for joining us. That's Tom Jones, who is a Senior Fellow at the Centre for Migration Control. He's author of the Potemkin Village Idiot Substack. We've had him on the programme before. It's not unusual. Let's speak to Jean, who is a caller from Berkshire, who wants to talk about two-tier justice. Jean, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Oh, hi. Yeah, I just wanted to talk about this different punishment for different ethnic minorities and white people.
Yeah.
The thing is, right, I'm mixed race, okay?
Okay.
So if I do something bad, if I nick something, do I get the ethnic punishment or do I get the white man's punishment?
Which one would you rather have, Jean? I mean, your point absolutely highlights the absurdity of this, doesn't it?
And I've got another point to make. My wife's white and I'm brown. My son's a kind of mixture. So my elder son is a little bit brown and my younger son is a little bit more white. So if they do something wrong, how do they balance that one?
Well, again, very succinctly and brilliantly illustrating the point. And also, you know, the thing is as well, you might have someone from an ethnic minority who has had all the chances in life that can be given to them, and someone who's white, for example, who has had no chances in life and might have all sorts of other issues. I mean, you cannot judge people. And it was Martin Luther King who said, do not judge people on the colour of their skin, judge them on the content of their character. And the content of your character is, are you committing a crime or not, in this instance?
Yeah.
So
we're all the same underneath. We're all the same.
We all bleed red.
Think about this separation in itself is racism. If you're bad, you're bad. If you're good, you're good. And that's basically it.
What would you say to police chiefs who are saying, well, you know, we disproportionately stop and search people who are black, for example, or we need to sort out these outcomes because we're arresting more black people, for example, proportionately than white people? What would your message to them, Jean, be?
I would just say, keep it simple, use statistics, and whoever you need to search for particular statistics, stick to that.
Okay. Jean, thanks for your call. Appreciate that.
I don't mind if I'm walking down the street, if I get stopped and searched, I don't mind. Good. The more we're stopped and searched, the more we can eliminate the issues of the world.
Well, thank you, Jean. Really appreciate your comment. I know you're a new caller to the station. Give me a call anytime. Very much appreciate your thoughts there. Lots of people getting in touch on Keir Starmer, including Alan, who says, I work 50 to 60 hours a day, I think you mean a week. I have a full-time job and I can't find a property to rent unless I offer at least half my salary. There's no availability here in County Antrim in Northern Ireland because hotels and private landlords are getting over £2,000 a week to house immigrants. There are loads of people all across the country as well who are trying to rent places. I was chatting to a young person I know recently, who told me yesterday that in order to secure a place, it's very, very difficult. Others who've told me that you've got to put sort of 6 months rent up in advance, for example. They can pick and choose the people. Darren in Twickenham says, I think we need to employ ex-crime members in government. They clearly get groups working together efficiently and get things done without support from a supportive framework of the civil service. Amanda says, does this man take us for fools? Keir Starmer has no intention of smashing the gangs. These illegals are future Labour voters. And another person who simply says, Starmer is a laugh and a half. Well, I'm glad you're amused. Dennis, thank you for this from Manchester. Cardi P, I think what the lady was saying earlier in regard to being under pressure to get a smartphone is that seemingly everything needs an app nowadays. You even have to have an app for HMRC. Not everyone wants one. Not everyone can understand them. This is definitely a point that should be talked about. Well, Dennis, you're right. And I think there are loads of things online. There are loads of people who are simply told, do it online, book your doctor's appointment online, do your taxes online, contact this online. And it's okay for most people because they can do it or they've grown up with computers, but there are an awful lot of people who really do want a phone line and they do want someone at the end of the phone who can help them do things. And I totally get this. There are a lot of people who don't have the internet, for example. You're talking about 2 million people or so don't have the internet in this country. It's not a huge number, but it does just assume that everybody can use the internet or go to their local library and actually access these things and use them. It's not just about access to the internet, it's about being able to use the apps as well. And I'm confused. I was booking a doctor's appointment the other day and there are loads of different options, and do you have a disability, do you have access needs, all these kind of things. And it took me a minute. I really had to focus on it for sort of 2 or 3 minutes to get it right. And if you're cognitively impaired or you're just someone who can't really work technology that well, there's someone in my family who isn't brilliant at technology who needs a hand with a lot of things. That's fine. you know, that's you're still as worthy a member of society than anybody else, and you shouldn't be discriminated against. So Dennis, thank you for your thoughts on that. I'm very happy to highlight that and talk about that. In a minute, we're going to talk about the Trump team monitoring a pro-life free speech case in the United Kingdom. We're going to get a verdict on, well, we have a verdict. We're going to get a sentence on this on Friday. And also, Kemi Badenoch backing Trump in an abortion free speech row. Stay with us here on Talk.
Quite what the extent of, unless you have free speech, you can't have free trade is. I don't think any of us quite know what's going on right now behind the scenes, but I think we've really rather blown it with America, I'm afraid. I do think if these tariffs are slapped on with everybody, I do think we have an opportunity to be the first country to get out of them, for the obvious reasons that our trade with America is roughly in balance. And hey, you know what? They are the biggest foreign investor in Britain, and we're the biggest foreign investor in America. So we've got lots of mutual interest. It's bad news, but we can get out of it.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very interesting story now about a case where there's due to be a verdict on Friday. This is a woman, Livia Tosishi-Bolt, who she was issued with a fixed penalty notice but refused to pay it. She was outside an abortion clinic and she was charged with infringing a public spaces protection order after holding a sign which simply read "Here to Talk" near an abortion facility in Bournemouth that breached a designated buffer zone. She was given a fixed penalty notice but refused to pay it. She claimed she had not breached the public spaces protection order and that she had the right under the Human Rights Act to offer consensual conversations. She pleaded not guilty at Poole Magistrates Court. We'll get the verdict on Friday, and indeed we hope to speak to her on this station after that verdict. But in a statement posted on X, the Bureau of Democracy, Human Rights and Labour in America, which is within the US State Department, appeared to criticise the government here in the UK. We've had this before from JD Vance, the Vice President. He said earlier this year that free speech in Britain and across Europe is in retreat. But this statement on the Bureau of Democracy, Human Rights and Labour, that's within the US State Department, which is their foreign office basically, it says US UK relations share a mutual respect for human rights and fundamental freedoms. However, as Vice President Vance has said, we are concerned about freedom of expression in the United Kingdom. Whilst recently in the UK, our senior advisor Sam Sampson met Livia Tosici-Bolt, who faces criminal charges for offering conversation within a legally prohibited buffer zone at an abortion clinic. We are monitoring her case. It is important that the UK respect and protect freedom of expression. Now, Tosici-Bolt has said that she is grateful for the US State Department for taking up her case. Andrew Allison is head of campaigns at the Popcons, Popular Conservatism, and joins me now. Andrew, good to talk to you again.
Good afternoon, Peter.
Good afternoon. This is, some would argue, a point of law in the United Kingdom. Obviously, many people will have different views on it. The verdict is going to be handed down on Friday. Some would say, what's it got to do with the Americans?
Yeah, well, I'd rather agree with that, and I wish the Americans hadn't got involved in this. We don't tend to tell the Americans what to do in their own country, and usually, the president and the vice president of the United States wouldn't really be interfering in domestic politics in the UK. So yeah, huge part of me says that. But at the same time, I really do think that they have a point, particularly in this case. I mean, these buffer zones are 150 metres away from any abortion clinics. Now, if protesters are standing outside those clinics, they're hurling abuse at women, they're threatening them, then of course something should be done. They should be arrested. I don't have an issue with that. But this particular lady, I mean, she is literally just holding up a sign that's saying, if you'd like to talk, I'm here. And by inference, it's saying if you do. By inference, it's saying if you don't want to talk, I'm not forcing you to.
I totally get that. Similarly, I'm just playing devil's advocate here by saying that if you're going for an abortion, which is in the case of about 1 in 4 conceptions end up with the fetus being aborted. If you're in that situation, you're probably going to be quite distressed. It's not going to be something that you're necessarily have planned to do. It is something, I know people who've been through abortions. It is not a pleasant experience by any stretch of the imagination. It is not something that a lot of people feel they want to do. It's something they feel they have to do necessarily. I totally get people who are anti-abortion. I totally think that a lot of people are vilified for simply saying it shouldn't happen. I don't want it ever to happen, but if it does happen, it should happen legally and safely. The point is, though, that if you are holding up a sign saying here to talk, well, clearly you are against what's happening in the abortion clinic. You're not saying that what's happening in the abortion clinic is correct. So even though the threat is negligible, you're not threatening anybody, you're not being horrible or nasty in any way. In fact, you're being probably very compassionate. You're nonetheless breaching that buffer zone, are you not?
It's been a number of years since I last discussed this, but I do remember reading at the time, maybe about 3-4 years ago, where some women have said that they didn't feel threatened at all by some of these people standing very peacefully outside. Others have said they have had a chat and they've changed their minds. So it can go either way. It's not threatening behaviour, so therefore I don't feel that the people should be prevented from the right to well, not even protest really. It's just saying if you'd like a chat, we're happy to have one. Yes, of course, it's going to be from one particular point of view. I accept that, but I don't see there's anything really wrong with that.
But if you're, you're clearly, though, sorry to sort of ask the question again, I suppose, Andrew, but you're clearly against the abortion clinic being there, and the point is, if you're a protester against this, there is a buffer zone in terms of any sort of protest, even the most peaceful, straightforward protest in the world. You're nonetheless breaching that buffer zone, are you not?
Yeah, but people are being arrested, and you know this, Peter, because I no doubt you will have covered it. People are being arrested for simply standing there. They haven't said a word.
But it's a legal buffer zone. The point is, it's a legal buffer zone.
Yeah. Well, it's a legal buffer zone against what? Yes, against some form of protest. That's what the law states at the moment. But you know, because you've covered this before, I'm sure, Peter, the people have been arrested simply standing there. They haven't held a sign up in their hands. They've been accused of praying.
So what should
we've had police accusing people of praying.
Yeah. No, I totally agree with you, and people shouldn't be arrested for that. Livia Tosici-Bolt has got this fixed penalty notice. Do you think she should pay it?
It's completely up to her. I'm not her lawyer. I'm not here to offer her legal advice. It's completely up to her. But I personally feel that she really hasn't done anything wrong. I do understand the sensitivities around this, but I think she's done this in a very generous and in a very kind way. She hasn't been threatening anyone. She hasn't been hurling abuse. And for me, that's a perfectly legal thing for her to do.
Well, we'll see what happens on Friday. Thanks for your thoughts on that, Andrew. I appreciate that. Andrew Allison there, he's head of campaigns for the Popcorns for Popular Conservatism. Adrian says, we do interfere with US politics. We sent 100 Labour activists during their election. Great show, says Adrian in Gloucester. Thank you, Adrian. Appreciate that. James in Manchester says, I work in recruitment and I've never seen so many people being made redundant in one day due to the national insurance increase. James, that's a fascinating thing to hear, and I'm not surprised, because there's so many small businesses. Maybe you're one of them. Maybe you're listening while you're I don't know, cutting hair or plastering or doing some woodwork or plumbing or whatever, who are thinking, actually, hold on a second, can I afford to take someone on? I spoke to a hairdresser a while ago who was saying, we have an apprentice every year. Usually we would take them on because, you know, we employ, I think it was between 12 and 15 people. Somebody will go part-time, or someone will leave or move on to another salon or move on to another job. Usually we would take the new person on, but actually we're just not going to do it this year, because the national insurance contributions mean that the price of that is about £2,000. James has been in touch from Leeds and says, good afternoon, great show as always. Just wanted to say I'm 28. I earned £52,000 last year. I worked my butt off and I'm very proud of myself for doing so. But I walked in to a big name supermarket today for some shopping, looked at 3 things, walked straight back out. I headed to Aldi. I think it's a sorry state of affairs when someone on over £50,000 a year is forced to scrimp and save pence on food shopping. This country is becoming unlivable. I feel for the people on minimum wage. Thanks, says James in Leeds. James, when someone on £52,000 a year is feeling the pinch, what on earth are people on far less than that thinking? And that's the point you're making, and it's a very, very good point. First of all, good for you for earning £52,000 a year. That's a high salary, a lot higher than the average salary in this country, which is about £36,000 a year for full-time work. But even James is saying he's feeling the pinch as well. Stephen Stoke says, would it be better to ban all boat sales, basically pay the boat manufacturers not to produce these boats unless they're bought by governments, says Steve in Stoke. Steve, I think it's one idea, but also they'll just find another way to do it. You know, you've got to tackle the problem at its root. Dave in South Gloucester says, sending failed asylum seekers to Albania is not going to help. Albania is on mainland Europe, so what is to stop them just walking out of Albania, strolling to France and taking another boat when they can find another reason, with the help of another lefty lawyer, to claim asylum again? At least Rwanda is a long way over and overseas, says Dave in South Gloucester, and may provide, Dave, as I think we probably agree, some sort of deterrent to this. And I'm just not sure there is a deterrent at the moment for asylum seekers coming here because of all the privileges they get. We'll take more of your calls shortly. We're also going to talk about Donald Trump signing off the Shagos deal before 6 o'clock. Yes, really. Many people will feel that's a betrayal. Maybe you feel that too. I know the White House is saying as well about these tariffs that are going to come into effect on the 3rd of April. There's a press conference going on there at the moment, and a little bit later in the programme we're going to talk about that. We're going to bring you all the latest and give you the news you can use in terms of telling you how it is going to affect your pocket. Stay with us here on Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thank you to everyone who's been in touch. I've just been having a quick look at Twitter there during the break, and Lenny in Ashford says, I believe the drink and drug laws are not fit for purpose. A proper debate is urgently needed, responding to your Talk exclusive about coked up coppers. Dallas says Danny Shaw was trivialising a serious issue by referring to different holidays when the matter clearly means soft pedalling on ethnic minority suspects. And in the same sentence, Starmer states the bills are going up and everyone will feel better off. Clearly he attended the same economics classes as Rachel Reeves, says Dallas as well. And Ali has been in touch on text 87222 with the word talk in your text to say send migrants to the Falklands or Ascension Islands to be processed. That will slow them down. Well, haven't the people of the Falklands Islands been through enough? Gary is in West Sussex, and on this story about policing, he has an opinion on this. Gary, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say? Gary, are you there? Gary in West Sussex? I'm not sure you are. It's a bad line anyway. We'll see if we can get you back. John's in North Yorkshire, wants to talk about two-tier justice. John, what would you like to say?
Hello, Peter.
Hi there.
What it is, I've just another take on this two-tier policing job. Now, my thoughts are is it could be put to use for criminals, because what people could do was actually use the ethnics or the illegal migrants for use in crime, because they'll be more lenient with them than what they would be with others.
That's a very interesting point, actually. And I mean, what do you think the government will get it right on this, or what's your view?
Absolutely wrong on this. I think I don't know what's happening really on the. To be honest with you, the law you should be for everybody. You're black, white, yellow, whatever colour you are. The law stands like that, as far as I'm concerned.
I think you make great points there, John. Thank you for giving us a ring from North Yorkshire. Miranda is not too far away, relatively speaking, in Cumbria, a bit further west. Miranda, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
I was just looking at the Sentencing Council, and the Director of Public Prosecution, Stephen Parkinson, is part of that. So
yeah, he is. Yes, he is.
I don't really have a great deal of faith in the law at the moment at all, because it's meant to be without fear or favour.
There's a woman on the Sentencing Council. This is absolutely true, Miranda. There's a woman on the Sentencing Council called Jo King.
Yes, I know. And
you saw that. You looked it up. You saw Jo King. You must be Jo King with your stupid two-tier justice idea. So, I mean, you clearly don't have a lot of faith in the Sentencing Council, Miranda. Do you think it should be abolished?
I do, actually, and the fact that it's just been postponed implies that it could come into act.
Well,
they could act on it anyway.
Well, they won't, Miranda, because what they've done, they're saying, what the Sentencing Council have done is saying we're going to not implement the whole lot of this. So there's 100% of this. This is like 10% of it. We're not going to implement the whole lot of these guidelines until the government gets this legislation through. And in fairness to Labour, and we've got to give them credit where it's due, doesn't happen very often, but Shabna Mahmood is the Justice Secretary. I'm defending her on this, and she has put down legislation today to say that this particular aspect on the ethnic minorities can't go forward, and I think that's a good thing.
Well, I hope she does, because it all relates back to sort of the Southport riots and basically how, especially with regards to what the police are saying at the moment, how they treat the communities differently in their approach to law and order there. And I hope to believe her anyway that she. Well,
she's put the legislation down. She's put it down in Parliament. I think the Labour are going to vote for it. I think the Conservatives are going to vote for it. It will go through. But I suppose the problem is still there, Miranda, in that there's this second aspect of it in regard to how the police treat people. The second two-tier justice, the race guide row that we're talking about today as well. What do you think of that, Miranda?
I do think it's disgraceful, to tell you the truth. It's all about without fear or favour at the end of the day. And I think but Justice Tibbles did that with the two boys who killed the 19-year-old. she gave mitigating factors with regard to them. So in actual fact, it's already happening. It was actually already happening anyway, saying that...
I don't know about that particular case, Miranda, but yes, certainly I think there are all sorts of ways in which people do try to say, oh, you know, my client has had drug issues, my client has been in the care system, my client has had all sorts of issues, therefore you should give them a lesser sentence. So Miranda, thanks so much for your thoughts on that. I really appreciate that. Bob in Cheltenham has been in touch on the abortion row story. We're going to get a verdict on this on Friday for the woman who breached, she's pleaded not guilty to breaching a demonstration buffer zone. Bob in Cheltenham says breaching a demonstration buffer zone is as straightforward as parking in a double yellow line. If you're within the zone, regardless of the nature of the protest or the demonstration, it is still a breach. Pay the fixed penalty notice, stop wasting the court's time. Next time, stand 151 metres away from the clinic. Great show as always, says Bob. And David Walthamstow says, in the Shagos Islands, so Trump has signed off the deal. OK, will the US still be using the islands? If so, how much will they be paying to and who? Well, we're going to get the information on that very shortly from Simon Diggins, who's my favourite military commentator on this. But certainly on the Shagos Islands, what has happened with one of them, Diego Garcia, where there's a big military base, well, America's going to lease that for, I think, 99 years. We'll get the details on that in a few minutes' time. But first of all, I think we've got Gary from West Sussex back on the line, a clearer line now. Gary, hopefully we'll be able to hear you. What would you like to say, Gary?
Hi, Peter.
Loud and clear. Great stuff, Gary.
You were speaking to your guest, Danny, who from what I remember, is some sort of criminologist about the police.
He's a sort of crime commentator, yeah.
Policemen behaving badly.
Yes.
Well, I think there's always been bad apples in the police, like there have been in every large organisation. It's an obvious thing to do. You're going to get people with nefarious intentions that are going to disguise themselves and work their way into these organisations, whatever would be good, bad or indifferent. And I think that when I was a young man, I had a few brush-ins with the police, and it was usually handled quite well. But one thing I did notice is that when I got interfered with, is what I'd like to. It was when I was dressed in a certain way. If I was dressed casually, you know, had a little bit of goss on or something like that, I tended to get stopped more than when I was in smart dress.
Right. Okay.
That might be a coincidence, but the bad apples have been around. I bet if you were to take, I mean, I don't know the statistics, but if you take all the statistics to the present day of the police force and who's been found out to be a bad apple, the percentage is probably going to be the same as if you'd have done it for 5 years ago. 40 years.
Well, maybe, Gary, but nonetheless, it's still wrong, and we still have to do something about it, don't we?
Yes, you are absolutely right. We shouldn't use it as an excuse. But isn't that what we're doing all the time with all sorts of things?
Well, I think you make a really good point, Gary. I think a lot of people, I certainly agree with you. There are so many excuses made for all sorts of behaviour, and I think we've just got to put our foot down and say, if you're a police officer, if you're a copper, you're meant to be enforcing the law, not breaking it.
Yes, you're absolutely right. But I mean, a lot of the police have helped me when I've been in tricky situations. And once when I got run over, the policeman saved me and he was holding my hand.
Yeah. And there are very, very good police officers, and I'm sure there might be some out on the beat. And there might be some out in the beat at the moment, Gary, maybe listening to this or at home off duty, listening or watching to this programme, thinking, actually, hold on a second, these clowns who are breaking the law, who are taking drugs, who are, turning up to work drunk, they're bringing us all down. They're making, all these. It's the coppers who do the good job. It's the ones who turn up every day, aren't necessarily the most spectacular, high-ranking, decorated officers, but the ones who do the right job, who do the right thing, and don't ask for huge accolades and don't make a fuss. Who I really worry about. And I think there are a lot of people, including police officers, a lot of decent people in this country who are doing all the right things. They're doing all the right things. They're turning up for work. They're paying tax. They're contributing. They're volunteering maybe in some way. They're giving to charity in some way. They're doing the job they're meant to do. And I'm not sure what the benefit of that is. I'm not sure whether people are getting a fair deal. I think a lot of people are getting a really raw deal. I think there are police officers who are getting a raw deal. I think there are people from all walks of life. There are people who are trying, think of all the stories we're covering today. There are people who are setting up businesses, who are trying to inject money into the economy, create a bit of wealth. They're getting a raw deal with the new laws that have come in today on the national insurance rise. There are people who won't break the law, who are treated badly. There are people who do break the law who are given excuses because of this two-tier guidance on the police race guide row that we're talking about as well. The Shagos Islands is another thing we're going to talk about in a second. And we're going to talk to Colonel Simon Diggins about that. And that is something where a lot of our money is being given away, and indeed our land, our part of the Commonwealth has been given away, and we're paying Mauritius money to take it. That's been endorsed by Donald Trump as well. A lot of people will feel very confused by that. I know I do. So let's talk about it in just a second here on Talk. We'll find out what is actually happening and what it means for you as well, especially in regard to taxpayers' money. More taxpayers' money that people are paying today. Some people will be paying their council tax bills today because they've got their salary through for this month and they're paying off maybe an instalment or maybe even the whole thing. And the point is that we're just not being treated fairly. And that is something a lot of people feel very, very angry about. 0344 499 1000. Stay with us.
What the extent of, unless you have free speech, you can't have free trade is. I don't think any of us quite know what's going on right now behind the scenes, but I think we really rather blown it with America, I'm afraid. I do think if these tariffs are slapped on with everybody, I do think we have an opportunity to be the first country to get out of them, for the obvious reasons that our trade with America is roughly in balance. And hey, you know what? They are the biggest foreign investor in Britain, and we're the biggest foreign investor in America. So we've got lots of mutual interest. It's bad news, but we can get out of it.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thank you to Mick, who says, why has no supervisor or chief police officer been held to account for failing to keep order in policing? They are never sacked. Well, Mick, certainly some of those officers who have been disciplined for being drunk or on drugs, certainly. Amanda on the Shagos Island says there has to be detail of this. We, the public, are not being told. The whole thing is so utterly bizarre, it does make you wonder. Well, there's a lot of detail that's not in the public domain, and indeed Downing Street has been asked about this within the last 24 hours. They haven't given a timeline for the final stages of negotiations, but a spokesman for the Prime Minister says it will come to Parliament following the finalisation and signing of the treaty, so we will be able to get some accountability on it. But Donald Trump has basically signed it off, the deal to hand the Shagos Islands to Mauritius. They're going to lease Diego Garcia, one of the islands, the US military bases there, for 140 years. Donald Trump says that is powerful and doesn't sound bad. Simon Diggins is with me now. Colonel Simon Diggins, military and defence analyst. He knows these things. He's my favourite military commentator and can always bring us through these things. Simon, a lot of people feel very shortchanged by this, feel they haven't got the detail in this. They don't know how much it's going to cost either. And on a day when so many people's bills have gone up for lots of other reasons, there seems to be just another cost, and perhaps a needless cost, to the UK Exchequer, and a lot of details we just still haven't got. Why has this happened?
Good afternoon to you. The timing, I think, is very interesting, isn't it? Because initially we were told that Donald Trump and some of his team were very anti this deal, and it was being sold as though they were going to be given away. And now, I think, through the personal diplomacy of Keir Starmer, he seems happy with it. As far as the US is concerned, the key thing is they retain their base on Diego Garcia, and that's basically what they're after. The initial deal said 99 years, with the possibility of extension for another 40 years beyond that. Just reading some of the reports that have come in today around it, it does suggest that the Indians have been involved, and the kind of the personal chemistry, if you like, between Narendra Modi, the Indian Prime Minister, and President Trump. Modi basically saying to Trump, "This is okay." Mauritius has got links to China, but there are other things going on as well in the Indian Ocean, not least that we're a friendly power and that the American interests will be preserved, and that may have tipped it. It doesn't change the position for us. Why are we basically paying to give away our our territory? 18 billion pounds, as you say, given all the things that are going on at the moment, bills going up, and where else could we use that 18 billion pounds in many, many different places? So I can't help thinking this is a really bad deal. But I think for the position of the Americans, they'll be content. They're going to keep their.
They seem to have a good deal about it. Just tell us about Diego Garcia and the strategic importance of that for the Americans. Why will Donald Trump feel this is good for them?
It's a fixed aircraft carrier, fundamentally. It sits in the middle of the Indian Ocean, but from that particular location, they can just deploy some of their strategic bombers, their B-52s, their B-2 bombers, which are stealth-type bombers, and they can deploy them right up, including the Middle East. And that includes what they might regard as threat countries such as Iran as well, and nobody can really touch it. It's the middle, literally, of the Indian Ocean, and they get plenty of warning if somebody came anywhere near it. So it's effectively like a fixed aircraft carrier, and there's nobody else going to come close to them, and they can defend it, and then from it they can launch operations as they require.
Why do you think Keir Starmer's doing this? What do you think his reasoning for this is?
Well, I think it started in a rather kind of odd way. Where because he's a lawyer first and foremost, very much influenced by issues around human rights, but also the idea of the role of the International Court of Justice. The International Court of Justice produced what they call an advisory opinion that effectively Britain should hand the islands over, and that the decolonisation process was badly done. Now we have to be honest. The way in which the actual Chagosian Islanders were treated was appalling. They were basically taken out off the island and dumped in Mauritius. Some eventually found their way to UK, and that was really, really badly done.
And actually, it was also made against the law in Mauritius to argue that the Shagos Islands shouldn't be given to Mauritius. That was sort of 4 years ago, and a lot of people were persecuted as a result of that.
Yeah, exactly. So there was a whole thing was there, but Mauritius and Diego Garcia, and they're not exactly close by either. I mean, they're literally thousands of miles away from each other, but they just happen to be during British colonial times governed by the same government. So there's nothing really to connect the two things together, except for, if you like, the accent of how the British colonial administration looked after them from there.
Simon, thank you for that. Thanks for that explanation. That's Colonel Simon Diggins there. He's a military and defence analyst, obviously a very senior officer in the UK Army previously as well. Rachel's been in touch and says, lovely to see you unexpectedly today, Peter. Rachel, thank you. I'm so confused, excuse my ignorance, but I can't understand why Trump has endorsed the Shagos Islands deal. I thought the US had a vitally important base there. Yeah, they do. That's the one. That is, of course, Diego Garcia. You sent that 4 minutes ago, Rachel. I think that was maybe just before I asked Simon that question about Diego Garcia. So they get to keep that for 99 years on a lease, possibly even 140 years, and their base there continues. So for the Americans, this is a perfectly reasonable deal from their perspective. They'll be very happy about it. But for us, the UK taxpayer, I think it's a bad deal. Jacqueline is in Eastbourne. Thanks for your patience, Jacqueline. I know we've attempted to fit you in a couple of times, and now you're with us, which is great. What would you like to say about the Shagos Islands, Jacqueline?
Well, I listen to this programme every day, and every day I feel myself getting a little bit more wound up, and I keep bottling out and thinking, no, I can't phone you. But today it's just been too much. You know, we keep hearing about this government and how we've got this deficit and how we're going to be cut from this and cut from that, and people are losing their businesses, going abroad and everything else. And yet they go and do such a stupid thing as this. You know, it's almost like we're being taken for absolute mugs, isn't it? You know, what on earth? If any one of us was to be in debt and then we did something like this, the world would look at us and think, what on earth are we doing?
Well, I completely agree with you, Jacqueline. Do you think?
I just can't. You know, my heart goes out to the farmers, I mean, I'm a pensioner, you know, and it's a struggle for us, you know. But my heart goes out to all these poor people, children that are going to be in poverty. You know, I'm a Christian, I'll admit it, and every day I pray for this country, and I cry for this country every single day. And I just have so much compassion for people. And I think, where is the compassion in this government? I don't think they've got any.
Do you feel Do you feel this government cares about people, and do you feel they have a grip, Jacqueline?
No, I absolutely. And the more I hear about it, and the stupid things this government's doing, the more I think they've got not an ounce of compassion for anybody. Probably for themselves. That's where it stops.
What would you do, Jacqueline? What would be the first thing you would do if you could change something about this country? What would you do?
I would get rid of this Shagos Islands thing for a start. I would consider not taxing people so much, but taking something off the migrants and then that are coming over illegally and giving it to our people. You know, these are the things I would do. Yeah. But this government, I mean, even in this blimmin' budget that she put over, she never said once, oh, we'll take something off the migrants, we'll stop this or we'll stop that.
And it just comes down, Jacqueline, sorry to interrupt you, but it just comes down to something, the fundamental point is just fairness, isn't it? I don't think there are too many people saying, all right, government, give me £100,000 a year, you know, make me rich. They're just saying, make my life a bit easier. Just can you do something just to make sure I have some money at the end of the month that I can go out and do some nice things with my family and not have to count every single penny all the time.
That's right. And this is where it's, I mean, this MP that was claiming money for a blimmin' dog.
Yeah.
I've got 2 dogs, but I wouldn't expect anyone to pay for my dog.
Well, it's an absolutely fair point, Jacqueline, and why should you? That was one of the big stories of the weekend. Jacqueline, you speak an awful lot of sense there. I think a lot of people are going to agree with what you say. I certainly do. Kevin is in Portsmouth and wants to talk about the Shagos Islands as well, I think. Kevin, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Good afternoon. Everyone's talking about Trump and how dreadful it is he signed this thing off. Quite honestly, Trump's a property guy, made untold amounts of money. Okay, so look at it. Is my rent, assuming they pay rent, I don't know, but is the rent going to go up? If they don't pay rent, are they going to have to pay rent? If they're paying rent, is it going to go up?
For this Diego Garcia?
For Diego Garcia.
Okay.
Have I got a security of 10 years? Well, 99 years. You mentioned 140. I've heard that mentioned elsewhere.
Yeah, there's an option. There's an option to add another 41 years to it. Yeah.
Yeah. So Trump's going to insist, he'll probably insist on that option. And he'll be sitting there and think, well, quite honestly, if the Brits are done to do something as stupid as this, that's their problem.
And it actually, I mean, it fall in a sense. I'm with you, and I mean, I think I don't really blame him, because he's said again and again and again, it's America first, and basically screw everybody else. It's America first, and that's what he wants. And actually, with these tariffs that are coming in the next few days, that is probably going to be equally, if not far worse, for the UK, but better for America in his estimation anyway.
Well, it's quite telling that he has been reported as saying to Starmer, you're not going to get a trade deal until the UK has freedom of speech.
Yeah.
And I tell you what, that really stinks. I mean, it really stinks, because you look at the heritage of this country, and now we're having the Americans telling us that we're effectively an oppressive regime.
Do you think there's freedom of speech in this country? Do you think there's freedom of speech in this country?
No, DJ. And that's why it stings. It's taking an American, any American, to tell us that in this great country of ours, we can now no longer speak our mind. Like that poor couple who were complaining about their school in a WhatsApp group. 6 cops.
I interviewed them over the weekend. Have a look at it on YouTube. I did that interview. It was an astonishing and crazy thing. Listen, thank you for your thoughts there, Kevin. I just want to quickly get in Graham in Peterborough just before the news. We're literally about a minute and a half. Graham, take it away.
Yeah, Trump played an absolute blinder. Starmer came out today saying that all the tax increases, or price rises rather, on us great British public, we're going to be richer. And Trump saw that there was an open goal. And now we're going to get the bill for the Shagos Islands.
If you were an American, would you be happy with what Donald Trump has done?
Yeah, he's saved themselves a whole load of money. And we've got the bill. We have got the bill for it. Well done, Mr. Starmer. Thank you ever so much. It's Starmer, Norwegian for stupid idiot,
Okay, thanks for your thoughts, Graham. Much appreciated, just taking us up to the news. Stephen Stokes says tariffs are only implied when you got a tough leader dealing with a wet, weak leader. There would be no tariffs if Maggie Thatcher was running this country, because she'd have told them where to go. And Ian in Oldham says, I love the show. Trump needs to look at what's happened to Hong Kong when he's endorsing Starmer's ridiculous deal. That's Ian in Oldham there. Thank you for that. In the next hour, we're going to talk about the Shagos Islands. We're going to talk about America. We've got Laurie Laird coming up to talk us through what those tariffs might mean. Rakib Ehsan, who is a really great social policy analyst, is going to talk about the two-tier justice, the two-tier row that is happening, and we're going to talk about those horrendous bills, Bill-mageddon, now on the 1st of April. Let me know your thoughts as well. Let's get some calls on as well between now and 7. 0344 499 1000.
the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk Drive. I'm Peter Cardwell. Just gone 6 o'clock. Lots to discuss between now and 7 o'clock. Kevin O'Sullivan's coming up between 7 and 10 this evening. I'm sitting in for Jeremy Kyle, who is off today. We're going to talk about one of the big stories. In fact, it's the lead story in the Daily Mail. Two-tier police race guide row, and that is that essentially the police are being told to treat black and white suspects differently. This is just as it's like whack-a-mole. You whack one mole, no one comes up. And we have got rid of, thank goodness, in a victory for common sense, the Sentencing Council have said that they're not going to bring forward its policy on treating ethnic minorities differently when it comes to sentencing when people have committed crimes. But now the police are being told at the sort of start of the process that actually you should treat black and white suspects differently. We'll talk to Dr. Rakib Hassan about that in a second. Also, this is Bill Mageddon today. It's the 1st of April. Loads of people have got their bills. I got my water bill 28% up. Loads of other people will have got bills with similar rises, and we'll be talking about that, about how you can mitigate that. Guy Anker's coming up a bit later on. Trump signing off the Shagos deal. What does it mean for us? It's a good deal for America. I think it's a really bad deal for the UK, and the UK having the best chance to overturn the tariffs, according to Jonathan Reynolds, who is the business secretary. I think he is perhaps a little bit too optimistic. Let me know your thoughts on all of this. Between now and 7, we'll take as many calls as we can. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me on 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV. Follow me at Peter Cardwell on Twitter, or X as no one calls it. You can also send me a voice note. You can send me a WhatsApp text message or give me a ring. 0344 499 1000. We'll also talk a little bit about the Metropolitan Police, because they have not taken part in a Freedom of Information request about cooked up coppers and BPM. Michael has been in touch to say the more troubling is the fact the Met refused to take part. We'll talk about that a bit more as well. Loads to discuss between now and 7 here on Talk. Well then, Dr. Rakib Hassan is with us. He's a social policy analyst. And Rakib, we have spoken a number of times, and you have spoken brilliantly, as you always do, about this row with the Sentencing Council, the unelected group of senior legal figures who've now capitulated to the government, capitulated to the Shadow Justice Secretary, Robert Jenrick, who is threatening legal action, and said, actually, maybe we shouldn't treat people differently at the sentencing stage with pre-sentence reports simply because of their ethnicity. Good. Job done. Excellent. Well done, Shabnam Mahmood. The Justice Secretary, don't often say that about Labour Cabinet Ministers, but she's done the right thing. She's put legislation down to make sure it can never happen. That's going to go through in the next few weeks. But now, here we are. One mole has been whacked. Now another mole has come up. And this is an official report by Chief Constables telling officers that racial equity does not mean treating everyone the same. What do you make of this, Rakib?
Well, there's a very similar two-tier problem here with this guidance for police officers on the beat. For me, it's very clear that ultimately their primary and central responsibility is to keep neighbourhoods safe and to prevent crime, and if crimes have taken place, to address that as swiftly and robustly as possible. And I think that, as you say, I'm glad that the Sentencing Council have now, taken a step back from the new guidelines that it issued, which is clearly an attempt to introduce a two-tier criminal justice system. But I think we need to obviously have a very robust pushback to this kind of guidance towards police officers, who are, by some people, being expected to treat white suspects and black suspects differently, taking into account things like community norms and cultural values, which I think is hugely problematic.
Well, we're going to get to a stage, are we not? I mean, we talked about this previously in the sentencing, but I mean, we've had all these problems before. We have had people unofficially doing this with the grooming gangs, the rape gangs, for example, saying, oh, it's just a cultural issue. Oh, they just treat women badly. We don't want to get involved. Don't want to upset the apple cart. Don't want to say, oh, that's Pakistani Muslim culture in this part in Rochdale or whatever. They've seen that. They've seen the problems, and we're always told time and time again, lessons will be learned. They haven't been. They're essentially permitting not quite the same thing, but along the lines of the same thing to say, well, actually, there are cultural norms that we need to be sensitive to. No, there are British values that are straightforward, law and order, commit a crime, be arrested for it, be prosecuted. It's as simple as that. Justice is meant to be blind. And what they're saying here with this new idea by the police and with this report is that that's not the case.
No, absolutely. And I think what you're seeing here, this is the multicultural state in full flow. And I think that these fears of rocking the multicultural boat are hugely counterproductive. Ultimately, we're brushing a variety of problems under the carpet. And I think that it's very clear that, as you talked about there, if you have a genuine national democratic community, then the rules and laws have to apply to all the groups within that so-called national community. Otherwise, you're on the road towards balkanisation. And I think also with this kind of guidance, whether it's the Sentencing Council, this new advice for police officers to treat suspects differently depending on their racial or cultural background, what you're doing, you're fragmenting society. And you're also risking the possibility of there being a white majority backlash as well. And I think that with all this talk about diversity, equality and inclusion, Peter, I think quite often it's hugely exclusionary. And ultimately what it's actually calling for is for minorities to be the beneficiaries of preferential treatment. So we made good progress in terms of racial equality. I think now the pendulum is swinging so far in the other direction. We have this two-tier governance, which some people have said it's a far-right conspiracy theory, but now we can really see it in various spheres of life.
Well, I mean,
especially worrying in criminal justice.
Shabnam Mahmood herself, the Justice Secretary, said there will be no two-tier justice under my watch. She called what the Sentencing Council was going to do two-tier. I wonder if Yvette Cooper will have the courage of her convictions as Home Secretary and say what the the Chief Constables are recommending here is two-tier as well. I hope she does that.
No, I hope she does. And I think we've seen very clear cases, for example, when it comes to the management and responses to various forms of public disorder. You'll remember the Hare Hills riots in Leeds, where the police were effectively in retreat. They ran away from that situation. And those riots took place after a number of children were taken in by social services from a Romani family. But then you saw, after the horrific atrocity in Southport, you saw the riots which took place there, very robust response from the police, where Merseyside Police was then provided with mutual aid and support from other neighbouring forces. So you can even see there's differences in how police forces respond to various kinds of disorder, perhaps depending on the background of the perpetrators involved.
Yeah. I want to ask you about an article you've actually written for The Telegraph. You've mentioned a number of different examples here, but one of them is the London Museum. This is a public-funded body asking its staff to address the problem of whiteness in a so-called diversity initiative. Tell me about that and the problems around that, not just for the London Museum, but for lots of other bodies as well that may be using whiteness essentially as a pejorative term.
No, absolutely. I think that with the emergence of the Black Lives Matter movement, we saw a lot of the hugely divisive racial culture politics, which has taken root in the United States, being brainlessly imported into the UK. And unfortunately, we have seen that institutional capture take place, and it does involve, I think it involve public bodies such as the Sentencing Council. Mentioned the piece that I authored for The Telegraph that focused on the British Museum. Ultimately, advising workers to challenge whiteness, so-called hierarchical working. And I think that this is just hugely divisive. And I think more than anything, arts and culture, it's in those spheres of British life where you can bring various communities together. I think you can cultivate bonds of social solidarity in those spheres of life. So I think this is hugely divisive. It's exclusionary. And I think for me, it has absolutely no place, especially when we're talking about publicly funded institutions as well.
Tell me, Rakib, your thoughts on the fact that Starmer has the worst record in the last 7 years of any Prime Minister, and there have been quite a few of them, in regard to small boats, because this is something that a lot of people are really concerned about. Our viewers and listeners, it's a perennial issue that's gone on for some time, and he's not smashing the gangs, is he?
Well, if he is smashing the gangs, and that was meant to be the most effective method in terms of bringing down illegal immigration, it's not working. And I think what's very clear is that, of course, I'm more than happy for the British state, and you have bodies such as the National Crime Agency to dismantle people smuggling networks, which can operate in the UK, but also in other Western European countries and indeed other parts of the world. But it's very clear here. He's talked about international cooperation. We had the immigration summit here being held in the UK, but sometimes you just have to operate in line with the core national interest. And I think that means the UK looking at its relationship with existing international human rights conventions and how they might be exploited in order to block the removal of dangerous foreign criminals in the UK, and also looking at our relationship with existing refugee treaties and how they are playing their part in our asylum system ultimately being undercut by very significant forms of illegal migration.
It's all very good points. Dr. Rakib Hassan, thank you. Rakib is a social policy analyst, and I mean, I think there's just so much in that. Phil in Hull has been listening and has given me a ring on 0344 499 1000. Phil, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say about, I think you made a point to Jody on the phone there in regard to Robert Jenrick as well.
Yeah. Could I first say that Rakib's talks all sense is a breath of fresh air.
Totally agree.
Right. The point I was making, I know you gave Mahmoud some plaudits for actually doing something, but my concern was this has been going on for a long time.
Yeah.
And presumably she had top people from her department in amongst these.
Yes, Phil, you're absolutely right, and I have a concern about that as well, because she wasn't told about it. She was totally blindsided by it, and Jenrick then brought it up, and she went, "Oh gosh, we need to do something about that."
Yeah, well, this is what I'm saying. So it raises queries, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I'm not saying she's been economical with the truth.
No.
But all I'm saying is that the people in there must be thick as mints, because everybody who I've ever heard talk about this has said it's wrong.
Well,
so
you're totally right, Phil. And
why can't they see it?
Well, what happened, Phil, was that 2 years ago the Sentencing Council came up with this policy. They consulted on it. They developed it. And surely, when you're the Justice Secretary, this is something that your civil servant should tell you about. What was clear, if you watch that exchange when Jenrick brought it up, was when he said to Shabna Mahmood, to the Justice Secretary, actually this is happening, and she clearly didn't know it was happening, and that's almost as bad. It's almost as bad as knowing about it and doing nothing about it. In fairness to her, she then acted, but clearly she wasn't being told what was going on or wasn't across her brief, and that is something that we should be worried about, Phil. What else are civil servants keeping from our Secretaries of State?
Well, this is it. I mean, ultimately, she's responsible for that department.
That's right.
I mean, you've worked in government.
Well, I worked in that department. I worked in the Ministry of Justice. And what I said, Phil, to civil servants was time and time again, I said, if there is something that's going to be controversial, that's going to be troubling, that is going to be something that my boss doesn't like, you need to come into my office, jump up and down and say, this is an issue you need to focus on, Peter, as a special advisor, as a sort of troubleshooter for all of that. And that clearly didn't happen in the Ministry of Justice.
But don't you think, Peter, that anybody with a modicum of sense would see the inherent danger of ostracising white people?
Yeah, well, indeed. I totally agree with you, Phil. I can't disagree with a single word you've said, and thank you for your thoughts on that. Stephen's in Manchester and has given me a ring, 0344 499 1000. Stephen, what do you make of this?
Right. Whether it's the sentencing arrangements with a clear bias against native or indigenous people, or whether it's the madness, the untrammeled madness of the Shagos deal, where we're actually giving away sovereign territory and then paying for this.
Paying for the privilege.
Yeah, all this kind of thing was predicted by Sir John Bagot Glubb, who wrote The Fate of Empires at the end of his life in the 1960s. Glubb had been a British Army officer himself. He was born in the 1890s. And he became famous as Pasha Glubb. At the end of the British Mandate period, he ran the Jordanian army.
He predicted all this? What did he say was going to happen?
He predicted all this. He said there are 4 phases to the Imperium. The first phase is where young, vibrant, determined men from an alien culture come in, they rip up the rule book, they just don't care, and they establish themselves. They're seen as a nuisance. You could equate this with the incomings on the boats. They're seen as a minor inconvenience, but they're not.
Okay.
They're the beginning of the end.
Stephen,
Now,
can I just say, if you're going to give us the other 3 stages, can you just do so a bit, sort of briefly?
Yes, let me do the last stage.
Okay.
In the last stage, we become weak, vacillating, we become self-effacing and apologetic for our imperium. We apologise to everybody, we pay everybody, we beat ourselves up, demographic begins to collapse, there's massive incoming from foreigners, and he marks this out in history as long ago as the 9th century Baghdad and different imperium through history. Every time we fail to learn, and we end up with these Sakia Starmers of history who feed us into the gristmill because we're no longer acting like men.
Wow, that's a fascinating fascinating call there from Stephen. I've learned something new there. I'm going to have to go and look up Sir John Bagot-Glubb. Thank you to Stephen in Manchester for that. Sorry, Stephen, are you still there? Did you have a final point to make? Did I cut you off? I don't mean to do that.
Bagot-Glubb, I got it through the interlibrary lending service, long out of print.
Right.
But there's a very good video on YouTube, which I've read the essay.
Yeah.
But there's a good video on YouTube.
Well, that's brilliant. That's a good tip for people if they want to learn a bit more. Maybe I'll even go and watch that myself. Stephen, thank you for your thoughts on that. And Angus in Southampton has sent me a WhatsApp message to say this is equality, diversity and inclusion in the police gone mad. We need to get rid of this, says Angus. Lots more we're going to discuss in a minute. We'll talk about whatever you want to talk about between now and 7 o'clock. Give me a ring, 0344 499 1000. But we'll talk about Bill Mageddon, which is today. Single parents apparently hit hard by the awful April bill rises. The Town Hall Rich list as well. Are you hurting economically today, the 1st of April? Sadly, not an April Fool. My water bill, nearly £100, went up 28% today. I'm sure that is just one example of many, many people's bills right across the country. Payday for me, anyway, was yesterday, and certainly a lot of that money is now evaporated, and I'm sure that is the case for many other people as well. Lots to discuss on this. Guy Anchor is going to be with us from Compare the Market. What do the meerkats think about this? I'll tell you in a minute.
Beckham had said to her in bed in Madrid in the hotel that she was the first time he'd ever been unfaithful, the first time he'd ever committed adultery. Well, at that very moment, a News of the World journalist was in Australia interviewing another woman who'd had a 2-year affair with Beckham. And the journalist tried to get, for confirmation, the woman to call Beckham, but he had his phone turned off the whole time because he was in bed with Rebecca. So...
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thanks to everybody who's been in touch. Claire McBarnett says every man and his dog now seems to be on some drug. Cocaine is a massive issue, and if it's such a concern, then start random drug testing. Well, yeah, it is. It is a massive concern. I don't think anybody should be on drugs. Anybody should be on cocaine. Certainly, they shouldn't be doing a job, any job, if they are under the influence of drugs. Certainly not being a police officer. But I do feel that it's passed by the wayside. Just people, cannabis, for example, is really, really dangerous. Loads of people say, oh, it's just a spliff, it's just young people, or, you know, it's just someone doing a line of coke or whatever. It's not that big a deal. It is a big deal. It's illegal, and if police officers are doing it, they shouldn't be. Two-tier justice as well. Lots of people getting in touch about this, including Jason from the Lake District, who says, imagine the meltdown if it was two-tier with white British people giving more lenient treatment. It's racism, pure and simple. Heads need to roll. John in Dartford says, why isn't this so-called two-tier justice being called out for what it is? Racism against white people. Why is racism always seen as a one-way street? And Steve is a magistrate in the Midlands. I don't think it's the first time Steve has got in touch with me, actually. I think he got in touch a few days ago on this as well, maybe even last Friday. Steve, thanks for getting in touch again. He says, I was in court today, and I can tell you there was absolute relief. The new guidelines have been suspended. There's no support for this mandated bias. None, says Steve. Well, thank you for that. Thanks for your perspective, Steve. Really appreciate that. And I know that as a magistrate, you're not really supposed to make public comment on these things. We're obviously not giving your surname and never would, but we're delighted that you give us the benefit of your opinion. And if there are any other issues around this you ever want to contact us on, Steve, please do. We love hearing from our viewers and listeners, no matter where they are, no matter what their background is. Everybody's opinion will be listened to. One thing that a lot of people are experiencing are higher bills, but apparently everything's fine. It's all fine. You think you've got less money in your pocket, but actually you're wrong. Everything is marvellous because Keir Starmer says the money in your pocket is going up. Everything's wonderful. Let's have a look at what our Prime Minister is telling us.
You may have seen from the spring statement last week, the prediction is that everybody will be on average about £500 a year better off because living standards are going up. So it's really important that we deliver on that, because I think people do feel after the last few years that more money in the front pocket and feeling better off is hugely important, and I'm conscious of the fact that bills are going up at the same time, and therefore making sure wages and what goes in the pocket outstrips what's going out in bills is really important.
Guy Anker is with us. He's a spokesman for Compare the Market. Guy, it's all fine. Everything's marvellous. You can close down your website because everyone's got loads of money and we're all fine.
You described it before the break as awful April, and it is unfortunately for a lot of people. You know, you look at energy bills, they're going up by an average 6.4% for most of us. Broadband and mobile bills going up, depending on your provider, between 5 and 7%. You mentioned your water bill going up by 20-something%. I got mine in the post the other day. It was £16 a month more. You know, that's nearly £200 a year.
It's just not a great line there, Guy. Let's see if we can perhaps re-establish contact. We'll perhaps he hasn't paid his Wi-Fi bill. I don't know. We'll get him off the Wi-Fi and see if we can get Guy back. But certainly so many people experiencing higher bills. I've moaned to you throughout the afternoon. I don't expect everyone to listen to every single word of this programme necessarily, but I've been moaning about the 28% increase in my water bill. There are loads of people, I mean, their mortgages have gone up because they've gone off fixed rate mortgages, for example. Energy bills going up as well. I've gone onto a fixed tariff for that because that's a bit cheaper with my energy company. There are loads of different people who, we're being told by the government, we've heard from Keir Starmer there, the cost living standards are going up. I'd love to hear from a single person. If I'm wrong on this, tell me. Do you feel your living standards have gone up this year? Do you feel since Labour came to power in July that your living standards have come up? I mean, maybe you've won the lottery, maybe you've got a massive promotion at work, but if you're essentially doing roughly the same job, if you're doing roughly the same kind of thing in your life, and if your family are doing roughly the same thing, or your partner or whoever else is bringing money into the home, do you feel better off? Do you feel living standards are actually going up? Because a lot of people certainly don't. Guy, on this point of living standards, I know you're back with us. People still need to compare the market, don't they? Because there just aren't those living standards. They don't feel as if things are getting better.
Well, what I'd say to pretty much all of us, really, this probably applies to you and me as well. When our bills are going up, it's the trigger to say, right, if I'm out of contract, or even if I'm not, and it's a small or no penalty to switch, see if I can get a better deal elsewhere. You can't switch everything. You can't switch your water company unless you move home, or your council, in terms of council tax, unless you move home. But things like, as you mentioned, energy, broadband and mobile, television subscriptions.
Can I just ask a question about broadband?
Mortgages, if you're coming towards the end.
Yeah. Can I just ask a question about broadband? I've never switched my broadband. Is it that big a deal to switch your broadband? Does a man have to come to your house and fix it all for you? And do you have to stay in for the whole day and all the rest of it? Is it really that big a deal, or is it not?
It depends who you're going from and to.
I'm afraid the line has beaten us again, I'm afraid, Guy. Maybe Guy hasn't paid his broadband bill. Will we get him on the phone perhaps for a chat? Or shall we see if we can get Guy? Well, we'll come back to him on another occasion. Anchor's away, unfortunately, on that one. But I mean, it doesn't take an expert from Compare the Market to let you know that there are all sorts of problems. Interestingly, Martin Lewis, the money-saving expert guy, these websites, that you often get. Here's a good discount tip, actually. These websites that you get half-price meals out or half-price cinema tickets, the kind of things that basically everybody likes a meal out. Everybody likes, well, not everybody, but a lot of people like a meal out or like going to the cinema. So essentially, you've got to take your insurance out with them, or you've got to buy some sort of product with them. Well, the fact is that with a lot of these websites, it can be any product. And Martin Lewis, sort of one of his experts, got this sorted out. And actually, if you go to, say you're going on the train to, I don't know, you're going from Manchester to Liverpool for the day. You're going for the day, you got some work thing to do. If you insure yourself for travel insurance, that would cost you probably something like £1.50. Well, you've still bought a product from one of these websites like Compare the Market, and that still entitles you to your half-price meals for the year and your half-price cinema tickets on a Tuesday or Wednesday or whatever it is, because you've bought a product. It doesn't have to be hundreds of pounds. It doesn't have to be big insurance or some sort of travel insurance deal or something like that. It doesn't have to be that. It just needs to be a purchase. And I may have been guilty of perhaps doing that myself, but it's a really good tip, especially in these tricky times. If you want to say, do you know what, I'd love to go out to the cinema a bit more, I'd love to go out for a meal a bit more, but it's so expensive. Actually, you can go on one of those websites, buy a very cheap product, but a product nonetheless, and then get access to a year's worth of those benefits as a result on your app or whatever. It's a really good tip, and it saved me some money. Jane says, Starmer is like Fagin, he has picked everyone's pocket. There's nothing left in people's pockets, not even loose change, says Jane. In a minute, we're going to be talking about Starmer and indeed Donald Trump, the President of the United States, because tariffs are on their way, and I think there's going to be more economic misery as well. Claire certainly got some economic misery. She says, my national minimum wage increase will get me £18 a month more. My bills are going up by £50. What planet is Starmer on? I can't take much more. Loads of people feeling like that, and I think there's further misery ahead, possibly to do with these tariffs. We'll hear more from Laurie Laird in just a second here on Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
So my producer Ryan and I have been talking during the break about the pronunciation of the White House press secretary. Her name is Caroline Leavitt. Disappointingly, she spells her surname Leavitt as an L-E-A-V-I-T-T. I wanted to be like an EastEnders where they go, leave it, you ain't worth it. But anyway, on a slightly more serious note and a more concerning one in regard to these tariffs that are coming down the track in a few days' time, we can see what she has been saying. Caroline Leavitt, rather than Leave It, the White House press secretary, she's been talking in the last hour. We'll get reaction from Laurie Laird in a second, but first of all, let's find out what Caroline Leavitt has said.
America will offer companies the lowest taxes, energy costs, regulations, if they make their products right here in the United States and hire American workers for the job. It's simple. If you make your product in America, you will pay no tariffs. We have already seen a number of the largest companies in the world respond to this. It is clear that President Trump's America First approach is already working.
That's Caroline Leavitt there, who is the White House press secretary. Laurie Laird is a political and economic commentator. Laurie, America First is coming through a number of the different stories we're talking about today. The Shagos Islands is one of them. Also, these tariffs, but it's not going to be good news for any of America's trading partners. Is a special relationship going to mean anything?
Peter, I mean, who knows? My job for a living, I look at tariffs and what Donald Trump has announced and what he's pulled back and what he's meant to announce, where there may be exceptions. I can't keep it straight. I actually have a spreadsheet. I cannot keep track of what is going on here. So
actually, there are a lot of people saying that a lot of people in the White House don't know which way this is going to go. And they don't really know what Trump thinks about this. I mean, that's no real way to make economic policy, is it?
And before we talk about the UK-US bilateral relationship, it's worth talking about if Trump is trying to get manufacturers, foreign direct investment into the US. How on earth do you commit $1 billion, a couple of billions? Factories take a lot of money. They take a long time to build. With this changeable policy, how do you commit that kind of money to the U.S. where you don't know what policy is doing day to day, much less after this administration? So business is not talking publicly in the U.S. about how confused they are. But privately, yes, they are lamenting the variability of this administration. And they're wondering about why some of the more conventional economists who are serving at Treasury are not be able to restrain Trump at this point.
You're an expert on tariffs. If Donald Trump imposes major tariffs on this country, how is that going to affect broadly the economy in general, but also the pound in people's pockets? Today, the 1st of April, Bill Mageddon, loads of people having increases in their household bills.
I think where we'll start is the first thing I think where it will hit will be car exports. Now, the UK sends 17% of its automobile exports to the US. Now, these are high-end car exports. If that tariff does go into effect, that 20% tariff that Trump has threatened, it's going to hurt. It may be, but these are expensive cars. So it may be that U.S. consumers who want a Range Rover may be willing to pay a little bit more, but it will hurt sales, no question about that. This is an interesting point. It probably will not show up in GDP cross-country statistics, but the places where cars are made tend to be places where the car industry is the biggest game in town. So it won't show on an aggregate level, but it will very much show on a local level.
So those areas where the tariffs are imposed, if it's on cars, for example, if it's on a different part of the economy, is it always goods, or are there services as well?
I'm so glad you brought that up. That was the point I wanted to make. A lot of the services the UK sends to the US are things like financial services, accountancy, law firms. If there are plans to tariff those services, Donald Trump has not explained them very well, and they are notoriously hard to tariff. You know, if you have an investment bank in the UK that's providing some degree of service in the US, it's not like something you can hold in your hand. It's not easy to put an extra price on that. And because the UK is so dependent on services to the US will be hurt less some of the big European exporters like France or Germany. Cold comfort, but I don't think if these tariffs come into effect, it will be as detrimental to the UK economy as it will other places in Europe.
Yeah, and I, from the perspective of our country, because we've been trying for a very long time, in fact really since Brexit, to sign some sort of trade deal, that just seems as far away as ever. And Jonathan Reynolds, who's the business secretary, seems optimistic. I personally, I'm not an expert, but I don't see any cause for optimism in any of this. Do you?
Peter, do you want one? I mean, talk to Justin Trudeau, the Premier of Canada, and talk to him about what a trade deal with the U.S. There you go, Governor of the 51st state, or ex-Governor of the 51st state. Talk to him about what a trade deal with the U.S. looks like. The trade deal between Mexico, the U.S., and Canada is a pretty watertight trade deal. Donald Trump has driven a lorry through that. This fascination that we have here with trying to sign a trade deal with the U.S., I don't understand it. It's almost political rather than economic. Donald Trump has shown us that he is not prepared to respect trade deals that are signed.
But the deal that seems to have gone well for him, not a trade deal, but a different deal, in regard to the Shagos Islands, he seems to have put America first in that regard, to the exclusion of others as well.
It's such a perfect way to end this conversation, Peter. I'm gobsmacked about this after all the talk about Greenland and how key Greenland is to the defense of the Western world. The fact that Donald Trump would so easily give up essentially claims on the Shagos Islands, which is the key place. Diego Garcia is one of the part of that archipelago, and such a key place for sending U.S. Air Force planes into theaters, into the Middle East. Such a key bit of offensive that the U.S. has had. It's almost like Donald Trump didn't know where that was on a map. I am fascinated by this, there was no negotiation, that was so easily ceded.
Yeah. And we'll get a lot more of the detail of that as time goes on. Laurie, thank you. Laurie Laird there, who is a political and economic commentator. Ali says, speaking about Caroline Levitt, she's mad if we don't want to buy in American products. They can't force them on consumers in other countries, which is an absolutely fair point. And speaking of other countries, we're talking a bit about Canada there. It's Mark Carney now, of course, the former governor of the Bank of England, who is now the Prime Minister of Canada, the former one being the floppy-haired fascist Justin Trudeau. I actually saw a picture of him the other day, but I'm not sure I recognised him because he wasn't in blackface. Rick in West Yorkshire has been in touch. He says, my water bill has gone up from £75 approximately per month to £100 approximately per month. I'm a 75-year-old man living on my own. I shower daily rather than bath. I water my garden from 2 big water butts, and I drink bottled spring water and G&T. Good for you. I went on a meter 2 years ago and my bills went up, so I cancelled, and I daren't go back, because after you cancel the meter once and go back, you can't cancel again, so you're stuck with it. Why? Says Rick. Rick, I have had almost exactly the same experience. My water bill was about £70-ish last month, and this month it's gone up to nearly £100. So it's gone up by 28%. I don't use a lot of water. I live mostly on my own. I have a lodger a couple of nights a week in my spare room, and I have almost exactly the same experience. And I'm asking myself, why does it cost nearly £100 a month for what is, to all intents and purposes, a person living alone, apart from Jack the cat, of course, housemate number one, to actually pay for water? Why does it cost so much? I don't know. And also, we've no option, Richard, because we can't change your water company. You can't say you don't want water. Alison has been in touch and says, I blame Starmer and the goons for the trade tariff. After all the nasty things they've called them, is it any wonder, says Alison. Well, a lot of other countries are dealing with the same thing, but certainly I'm not sure Donald Trump feels that charitably towards the UK. And it's fine for the Business Secretary, Jonathan Reynolds, to say, oh, it's all marvellous and it'll all work out fine and maybe in the longer term it'll be all right. Well, if you're a worker in a car factory, or you're someone who's principal breadwinner in your home works in a car factory, and they're going to put tariffs on cars, as Laurie Laird says there, it's not just the bills today that you need to worry about, it's what's coming in a few days' time, which may have a big effect on your job and your ability to pay those bills. It's not pleasant. It's not good. This country is in a rough state. Economically, we're in a rough state, and the Prime Minister says that, perhaps things will get better and people will have £500 in their pockets and it'll all be marvellous. Well, I'm not sure. I'm not sure it's going to get any better. Let's try to be optimistic before the break, because it's time now to find out how you could be in with a chance of winning Oasis tickets for Wembley this summer.
How do you fancy winning tickets to the hottest gig of the century? Here at Talk, we're giving you the chance to bag yourself a pair of tickets to Oasis at Wembley this summer. Plus, we're giving away a whopping 10 grand and putting you up for the weekend in a London hotel. All you need to do is text the word prize to 83338 and you're in the draw. Alternatively, you can enter by post. Once again, all you need to do is text the word prize to 83338 or you can enter by post. Good luck.
18 plus UK excluding Northern Ireland. Enter by text for £2 plus one standard network charge by 11 p.m. on the 7th of April 2025. Or post your name and number to Oasis Competition, PO Box 3190. Colchester CO2 8GP to arrive by 5 p.m. on the 10th of April 2025. Full terms and conditions at talksport.com.
This is a News Broadcasting Network promotion.
What kind of a grown-up looks at a 3-year-old kid and says, that kid is getting expelled, that kid is getting suspended, that kid is transphobic? 3 years old. What's happening to this country? How can sentient adults treat a little kid like that? He or she was only one of them. 94 across the country.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Conspicuous by her absence this afternoon has been Claire from the Wirral, who owes me £10. We made a bet, I think last Friday, in regard to my belief that the government would put down legislation on this two-tier sentencing. She said I was far too optimistic and living in cloud cuckoo land, words to that effect anyway, and she bet me a tenner that I'd be wrong. Well, they just have, Claire. We've been ringing you this afternoon and you haven't been picking up your phone. Maybe you're busy, you're probably at work or doing something else, but Claire, do get in touch. I'm back on Friday between 4 and 7 on Drive, and I'm on the weekend as well from 10 o'clock. And I'll be on with Jeremy tomorrow, actually, just for a bit of a chit-chat about politics, about 25 past 4, something like that, and with Julia as well on Prime Minister's Questions. I pick a couple of clips at about 4:45 to 1. When Prime Minister's Questions is over, I chat through them with Julia. She asks me if there are any highlights. Sometimes there are, sometimes they're not. And we talk through the politics of the day as well. So I'll be back tomorrow, 12:45, 4:25, and then on Friday for Drive between 4 and 7. And then at the weekend, starting from 10 o'clock on Saturday and on Sunday. Matt in Derby's been in touch and says if Free Gear Keir thinks people's standards of living are increasing, he may want to ask Lord Ali for a new pair of glasses, as they're clearly the wrong ones. Matt, that is a very, very good message. Let's speak to Sean in Durham about these bill rises. Sean, thanks for giving me a ring on 0344 499 1000. What would you like to say?
I tell you what it is, Peter. I am sick to the back teeth of this Tory Labour government, right?
Well, the Tories aren't in government anymore.
I know, but I tell you what it is, right? Keir Starmer and Reeves need to be kicked out of the Labour Party as soon as possible, mate. They're making a right mess. I never vote. For 40 years I've been voting Labour, right? And I tell you what, he is the worst Labour leader I have ever known in my life. You know that.
Worse than Jeremy Corbyn? Worse than Ed Miliband?
Worse than Margaret Thatcher.
Well, she was a Conservative leader. What about Michael Foot? Is he a worse leader than Michael Foot?
He's worse than anybody.
Wow.
And I tell you what it is. I'm fuming, mate.
Who should lead the Labour Party? Who is someone in the Labour Party at the moment you think would be a good Prime Minister?
I don't think there's any of them.
Mm-hmm.
I did like Claire Rayner, but even she's turning weird. You know what I mean? But at the end of the day, who the hell have we got? You know what I mean? Labour.
Do you mean Angela Rayner?
Aye, Angela Rayner. But
I think Claire Rayner would make an excellent Prime Minister. She'd solve our problems anyway.
But at the end of the day, mate, serious questions have to be made about this bloke, like, especially when he's called Sir. I never call him Sir. I call him an idiot.
Okay. Well, you made your views clear there.
At the end of the day, mate, he is making a right cock up about this, mate.
What is it particularly that you what was the what's the number one issue for you, Sean?
I just can't stand the bloke.
And you're a Labour voter. Did you vote Labour the last time? Did you vote Labour in July?
Well, I didn't, because I didn't have an ID.
Right. Okay.
That's another thing the Tories brought in, the thinking they would get back into power.
You can get voter ID for free though, Sean. You can get it for free.
Where you get that free, like?
You can get your voter ID. They'll sort you out for free. They will. They do. You can get a card, a voter ID card. Sean, thanks for your thoughts there. I appreciate that.
No problem.
Thanks very much indeed. Georgina is in London. I think you want to talk about migration, Georgina?
Good evening, Peter. I wish I could call you with some happy news, because this is getting beyond a joke. I watched Keir Starmer give his little talk on smashing the gangs, as he usually does. The guy's delusional. These gangs that Keir Starmer keeps saying he's going to smash are based in France. It's the gangs in France that are putting these migrants on the boats to send them over here.
But he would argue, Georgina, that actually yesterday's conference in London, talking to lots of other countries, we've got to deal with the French. He would say that is what he's doing, working with other people and other countries to try to fix this.
Hang on a minute, Peter. You mean the deal with the French that are taking £500 million off us every year?
Do you not feel that's good value for money in terms of all the good work they're doing?
Can pigs fly, Peter? Can pigs fly? Is the Pope a Catholic? Absolutely not. They're not doing a good job. The French are taking £500 million off us to protect our borders. This is under false pretences. We should take that money back each year and assemble our own beach patrol force.
I'd like to do it on a payment by results basis. I would like to say to the French, do you know what? If there's a certain percentage of people coming across and you stop them, we'll give you some of the money. If you stop 50% of them, we'll give you 50% of the money. That's what I would do.
Well, you know what? You should be in politics, my darling, because that's a really good idea. But what you've got to realise also, Peter, this man has had every opportunity since he came into office, and he's done absolutely nothing about the illegal migration. He doesn't want to send these illegal migrants back because these are his future voters. He will abolish identification for voting. This is what's coming next. Watch this.
Well, they shouldn't absolutely not do that. And I am there are a few things that I am 100% fundamentally in favour of, and that is that people should show identification when they vote. Now, Sean in Durham said he didn't have voter ID. There's a free scheme where you can get a card that says, you know, here's my photo, here are my details, here's my identification. If you don't have a passport, if you don't have a driving licence, which some people don't, you can get that for free. And I think voter ID, and do you know what, postal voting, not all of postal voting, there are people who are infirm, can't get out for all sorts of different reasons, they should be given a postal vote. But this nonsense that people should be given a postal vote simply because they can't be bothered to go to a polling station, I think it's crazy.
Well, I'm with you 100%. You've got the right idea. But from where I'm sitting and from what I'm seeing, there seems to be an clandestine agenda with this Labour Party to bring this country to its knees. And it's the most vulnerable that are suffering the most. But we're waking up to their antics now, Peter. They've got nowhere to hide from the lies that they've been telling regarding not getting rid of the pensions heating allowance and council tax. Honestly, I could go on and on and on with the lies that this man has told. It's a good job. It's a good job his nose doesn't grow every time he tells a lie, because he would look like Pinocchio.
Okay.
This is all lip service for the upcoming May election, so I would not believe a word that he says.
Georgina, thank you. That's Georgina in London. And true to her word, Claire in the Wirral has given me a ring. I expect she's a very good excuse for being silent until now. Claire, have you been busy today? I hope you're all right.
Yes, I have been busy today, Peter. At 4 o'clock, I had a brain scan.
Oh my word! Now I feel terrible, Claire. Are you all right?
Just to see if I've got a brain there. I've got a tumour, I'm afraid.
Oh, you definitely have a brain, Claire. But I'm so sorry to hear about the tumour. What are they going to do for you? Are they going to help you out? Going to give you some therapy for it?
I don't know. You know, I've got to. You know, I'm not kind of that far on with it, really. They're just going to see how you know, it's developing. Let's put it that way. And you know, and then I'm going to go to, they're sending me to Walton, actually, which is more specialist.
Right, okay, so you can...
I'm on the Wirral and Walton's in Liverpool, but they're sending me there. So anyway, but I'm still, you know, I'm still cognitive and, you know,
excellent.
Whatever.
Are you in pain, Claire? Are you feeling all right, or are you getting headaches, or how are you getting on?
No, I'm fine. It's affecting my eyesight. One of my eyes is deteriorating. There's a vision in my eye. One of my eyes, because the tumour's sort of, it's pressing on my optic nerve, apparently.
Oh, goodness me.
So that's what's going on at the moment. But no, otherwise, no, I'm chipper. You know, I'm getting about and everything. I'm fine. But I did hear you goading me, Peter.
Claire, do you know what?
I've just come back.
Do you know what we're going to do, Claire? What I've decided to do. First of all, you did lose the bet. I was right and you were wrong.
Well, I didn't. No, I mean, to be quite honest, if you see the wording of it, they didn't say cancel. It's a temporary word. So I'm, you know,
well,
I will.
Well, I tell you what I'll do. I tell you what I'll do for.
No, I'd love to give £10 because you're a lovely guy, and I would love to give £10 to whatever charity you choose.
Here's what we're going to do, Claire. Here's what we're going to do. If it's all right with you, and if it's not all right with you, that's okay. Why don't you give £10 to the Roy Castle Lung Cancer Foundation, and I will give £10 to a charity of your choice, maybe something to do with the illness that you're suffering from at the moment, or whatever else you want. What charity would you like to nominate?
Well, I would like to nominate Clare House. It's a good bit of advertising as well, isn't it?
Well, what's Clare House? What's that?
It's a hospice
for
children, and it's on the Wirral, and you know, it's doing a great job, as you can imagine.
Great stuff.
I would love, you know, that £10, Peter, to go to Clare House.
That is where it will go.
Happy.
That is where it will go.
And I will give £10 to the Roy Castle.
Brilliant. That is great stuff, Claire. Deal done. And listen, on a very serious note, I will do that this evening, and also I wish you all the very, very best with your treatment and everything. And just keep us updated, Claire, because we are thinking about you, and I know there may be battles ahead, but we'll hopefully talk and be with you every step of the way.
Yeah, but I'm keeping an eye, Peter, because I really do think they're still going to sneak this in, and
Okay.
I don't trust Mahmood. And I love Georgina, by the way. On the phone, she's a brilliant lady, and she talks sense.
Speaks a lot of sense. Claire, lovely to chat to you, and thanks very much for getting back in touch. Really appreciate that. Should say Clare House Children's Hospice that she talked about there. I've just been given a bit of information on the screen about it. The hospice helps seriously and terminally ill children from birth to 23 years old. It provides specialist nursing care and emotional support. And I was talking as well about the Roy Castle Lung Cancer Foundation. My really good friend of mine, James Brokenshire, who used to work with, sadly died of lung cancer a few years ago. The Roy Castle Lung Cancer Foundation does fantastic work, and I am very happy that Claire in the World is very kindly going to give her tenner to that, just as I will be giving my tenner to the Clare House Hospice later on this evening. Kevin O'Sullivan is with us now. He's on between 7 and 10. How are you doing, Kevin?
I'm all right, Peter.
What's coming up in your show?
Well, we're going to have a look at two-tier Kia's ludicrous Smash the Gang summit, which has limped into its second day. I mean, this guy, he's talking about, you know, smashing all the people smuggling. He hasn't smashed any gangs. This strategy won't work anyway. And he hightails it out of that summit very, very quickly, makes his speech. I understand your anger. No, you really don't, mate. We're angry at you. And then he hightails it across town for a conference about Adolescence, a fictional TV drama. Are you going to tell him, or shall I, that this is a fictional story and we don't actually have a problem with 13-year-old boys going around stabbing girls because of what they've seen on the internet? There is no evidence